Equity indices built on opinions? That's the old way. The new way is Bloomberg Equity Indices, built using transparent, rules-based methodologies that are more responsive to changes in the markets, powered by 450 billion daily data points, and backed by research by hundreds of global experts, delivering benchmarks driven by the markets, not opinions. Bloomberg Equity Indices. Get evolved benchmarks for today's equity markets.
Ever wonder how the way you start your day can make all the difference? Tired of waking up struggling with congestion? Without Neomed's sinus rinse, you are likely to battle with nasal congestion, impacting energy levels and overall well-being. The choice is clear. A great morning starts with Neomed sinus rinse. Now I can't imagine starting my day without it. All natural sinus relief.
Alexa, my sister just dropped Maggie off.
Fun, an evening with your niece.
So what do kids do?
How about playtime? What kind of things does she like?
No idea. Mermaids?
Cute and Gobi likes for an undersea adventure.
Alexa, we should do this again next weekend.
I'll add it to your calendar.
With hundreds of sales every week and low prices store-wide, you can eat well for less at Whole Foods Market.
However, on this issue, we stand together.
Nobody covers geopolitics like Bloomberg.
We want to see peace in the Middle East. We want the nuclear dust. We're going to want that, and I think we're going to get that. We've agreed to that. Yeah, we've agreed to that.
You want the enriched uranium before you get it.
We want no enrichment, but we also want the enriched uranium. If this happens, it's a great start for Iran to build itself back, and it's everything that we want. And it's also great for Israel, and it's great for the other Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, all of them, Kuwait, and Bahrain in particular. So it's great for all of them.
Mr. President, do you still need $200 billion?
It's always nice to have. It's always nice to have. It's a very inflamed world, and the Democrats inflame it. Largely the Democrats inflame it. Let me just talk about the others. So ICE has done very well. I've requested, now I'm a big believer that they should be able to wear masks when they go and hunt down, murderers, criminals, and others. But for purposes of the airport, I've requested that they take off the mask. I don't like it for the airport, and I believe they are willing to do that.
Wear masks, not at the airport, but they need to do it when they're out in the country.
The people coming into the airport, typically speaking, aren't murderers, killers, drug dealers, etc. There may be a few of them, but there aren't many. They're people that want to come into the country, or that people want to leave the country, going to maybe their home country. So I didn't think it was an appropriate look for an airport. I think it's a very appropriate look when they're out on the street trying to find one of the 11,888 murderers that Sleepy Joe Biden let into our country.
Last year you gave a $10,000 bonus. Sorry. Last year you gave a $10,000 bonus to UK workers who kept showing up to work during the shutdown. So you do that again?
Oh, it could happen. It's amazing. There's such people that are really, really loyal and great, and it's not easy for them. And this is all caused by the Democrats. It's just so you know, all this money was approved. Everything was approved. This is done. The Democrats went in, and they want to have radical left lunatics come into our country. They want to have drug dealers. They want to have murderers come into our country. They want to have open borders, and we're not letting it happen. That's what this is all about. They don't want voter ID. They don't want proof of citizenship. They don't want mail-in ballots. They're so corrupt. What they want, the only thing they want is mail-in ballots. So we also added, as you know, into the Save America Act. And it's called Save America. It's not the Save Act. But we added no transgender mutilization of our children and no men in women's sports.
These laws go well, and you reach
I don't think he's going to be a big man.
if these laws go well and you reach a ceasefire agreement with Iran, do you believe Israel would abide by that agreement?
I think Israel will be very happy with what we have. We just spoke to Israel a little while ago. I think they'll be very happy. This will be peace for Israel, long-term peace, guaranteed peace. If this happens, and I can't guarantee it, but I think it's going to, my life is a deal. That's all I do is deals my whole life. I think this is something that's going to happen. And why wouldn't it happen? So tomorrow morning sometime, their time, we were expected to blow up their largest electric generating plants that cost over $10 billion to build. It's a very good one. There was no dearth of money. And one shot, it's gone. It collapses. Why would they want that? So they called. I didn't call. They called. They want to make a deal. And we are very willing to make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. And it's got to be no more wars, no more nuclear weapons. They're not going to have nuclear weapons anymore. They're agreeing to that. Any of that stuff, there's no deal.
You said you want to get the enriched uranium. How are you going to get the enriched uranium?
It's very easy. If we have a deal with them, we're going down and we'll take it ourselves.
Can I ask you, the Treasury lifted sanctions on Iranian oil that was out to sea. You criticized President Obama for giving Iran $1.7 billion.
No, I just want to have as much oil in the system as possible. And we don't even know if Iran gets that money. Frankly, I think it's very hard for them to get it. But you have ships that are out there that are loaded up with oil. Rather than keep it there, I would rather see it go to the system. Any small amount of money that Iran gets is not going to have any difference in this war. But I want to have the system be lubricated.
Even $14 billion, you don't think comes to?
Where's the $14 billion?
Because the inflated price, they get $14 billion from the.
I don't think they're getting the money. I can tell you, when this is all over, I will tell you who's getting the money.
From California, given that it'll take some weeks to arrive, is the intention to police the strait or take off?
What are you doing?
Well, it's been reported that their Marines have left California, left San Diego last week, both at the end of the week. Why are they headed there now?
Well, let me ask you this. If you were in my position, and I asked you that question, do you really believe I'd give you an answer? It's a crazy question.
Mr. President,
We don't talk about strategy, yeah? Let it invite Biden. It's devastating. These people are let in by Biden. We're getting them out. We're getting them out fast. That's why ICE is so important. They're doing such a good job. This animal, I saw the whole thing last night. They gave me a briefing. Came in through Joe Biden with his open door policy, and his borders are Kamala, who never saw the border. Never made one phone call. All the ICE people, you see, they all know me. Everyone knows me. They like me. I speak to them all the time. Didn't make one phone call during 4 years. She was the border czar to anybody on the border. Never went there. This person came in through the open door policy of Joe Biden, and we have others. We're taking them out by the tens of thousands. We're doing a great job, but it's a shame. They've hurt our country. Just remember this. Joe Biden and that gang of radical left lunatics, some very smart, but radical left and bad ideology, sick people. These people have hurt our country very badly.
How is that different from what Russia is doing in Ukraine by Ukraine?
Well, I think it's a lot different. And if you look at the nuclear weapons that they wanted to have, that they wanted to possess, a lot of things are different. I'm not a fan of what Russia's doing either, just so you understand. All right? But it's a lot different. You're talking about a country that has been evil for 47 years. They've been horrible. Death all over the world, not just us. Look at the way they attacked unexpectedly all of those countries surrounding them. It was not supposed to. Nobody was even thinking about it. But they wanted to take over the Middle East and they wanted to knock out Israel permanently. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they would have been able to do it.
Mr. President, Mr. President, you know why Joe Biden was leaving?
Look, I'm not a fan of the guy. If you look at, and you never cover this, if you look at his truths or whatever he went on, if it's X or truth, if you look at his truths or his statements, he was all for everything. All of a sudden, he wasn't. He was a man that I met at Dover. He came and his wife was killed. He remarried fairly quickly. His wife was killed, and I felt badly for him. He ran for Congress, he lost. He ran for Congress again and he lost. I said, you know, he's a guy, nice guy, seemed like a very nice guy. I bet him he was pretty heartbroken, but I said, you know, it's a shame. He ran for Congress twice. Call him up, give him a job in the White House. Smart. They gave him a job in the White House, and this is what he does to me, you know? Being a nice guy doesn't pay off too much. Think of it. He loses twice in Congress, ran not very good campaigns, should have won. But he loses twice. How do I get him? I have my people call him, because I didn't deal with him for the most part. I saw him a couple of times, but I never dealt with him at all. I had no idea his ideology was left or right, whatever it is. I can say this. He said very strongly that Iran is not a threat. Iran's been a threat for 47 years, and there's not a country in the world that doesn't agree with me on that. So I take this guy, Joe Kent, who lost twice for Congress, pretty badly and tough, and was devastated, and I know that he lost his wife. So instead of letting him live out his life, I brilliantly have my people call him and offer him a job in security, essentially, in the White House. Now, what does he do? He goes out and he says that Iran is not a threat to get publicity. Now, he probably signed up with CNN or maybe signed up with your division of Newsmax. I don't know, but probably signed up with CNN or somebody. But if you look at his tweets, X's or truths, whatever he uses, I don't know because I don't follow him. What he said is 100% he agrees with me. All of a sudden he leaves. I never knew he had a problem. Now I hear they're looking at him for leaking. That's possible. But just so you understand, just to put it to rest, he lost twice badly. He also lost his wife. He's remarried since. He lost his wife. I felt badly for him. So I told my people, reach out to him, give him a job at the White House. This is the thanks I get. Any other questions?
He said Iran was not an imminent threat, but that's what the intelligence showed.
I think it was an imminent threat. I think that Iran, if we didn't bomb them with the B-2 bombers, now that set them back. But if we didn't hit them with the B-2 bombers, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks to a month. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it as soon as they got it.
If Arabia obliterated their nuclear sites last summer with your strikes, then how can you argue it was an imminent threat now?
Oh, we hit them so hard, we obliterated them. But that doesn't mean with the right equipment, you can't dig down and go get it. We don't want that, and we won't have that. But we obliterated that site. They still haven't been able to get it. That was a complete success. But if it wasn't, they would have had, if we didn't hit them, if we didn't use the B-2 bombers, which are unbelievable, we just ordered 22 more of them. Modern version, by the way, super modern version. If we didn't hit them with the B-2 bombers, they would have had, within 2 weeks of that attack, that's why we hit them, because we knew they would have had a nuclear weapon. They would have used it on Israel and the entire Middle East.
Overall crime in Memphis is down 43% since you began this task force. Is this a template you think is?
Well, what I'm doing today, really, this was a little bit before, set up a couple of weeks ago. This was before we had this situation with Iran take place last night. And by the way, they're just not committed. When they say, I'm sure they don't mean that. When somebody says, "Oh, I didn't know you were," we were talking last night, and I'm sure they have a lack of communication, which is appropriate considering we blew up, in addition to their Navy, Air Force, every division, their radar. We also blew up all of their anti-aircraft and communications. So they have no telecommunications. So there is a lack of, I would imagine, a lack of coordination.
If you're worried about the miscommunication.
Well, we think all we can do is think, look, we have numerous leader groups. They've all been killed. Very dangerous position. Khomeini was killed. Khomeini's son is unavailable. Nobody knows what happened to him. I can say they haven't seen him there either. Something is going on with him, but regardless, I don't consider him really the leader. But they do have some leaders left, because we blew up group number 1, group number 2, a lot of group number 3. But we think we have people that are very representative of the country and will do a good job in running.
Elon Musk has offered paying TSA workers during this PHN shutdown. Is this something that you've been speaking to him about?
Yeah, I'd love it. I think it's great. Let him do that. And I want to thank ICE because they stepped in so strongly. They'll do great. And if that's not enough, I'll bring in the National Guard. We're not going to have the Democrats destroy our country. These people are the most destructive, sick people, the Democrats. They want, and they're fighting for this. They're fighting for men and women's sports. They're fighting for transgender for everybody. Everybody go out, get your kid a nice operation, and change the sex of your kid. They're fighting for, no, think of it. They don't want you to do voter ID. You walk into a booth. In California, if a person who's doing voting, an official, asks you for identification, they're subject to being arrested. What's wrong with this country? So we're fighting it hard. And I think they should, because the Democrats are being blamed for the shutdown, and it's their fault, and they're getting killed. That's why when I announced yesterday about ICE, the Democrats called. We want to settle. We want to settle. And I told the people, don't settle. Don't settle. Because we have something bigger. Only settle if you get the Save America Act, voter ID, and so important, proof of citizenship, etc. Thank you very much. We're dealing really mine. That was mine. That was like the paperclip. You know the story of the paperclip? 182 years ago, a man discovered the paperclip. It was so simple. And everybody that looked at it said, why didn't I think of that? ICE was my idea. First person I called was Tom Homan. I said, what do you think? He said, I think it's great. Then I saw today there was some masks on. I didn't think the masks were appropriate. I put out a statement and I asked them, would it be possible to take off the mask? Because they should wear a mask when they're dealing with the murderers and the thugs let into our country.
You said there's many points of agreement with Iran right now. What, can you give us a
many, like 15 points. 15 points. Well, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. That's number 1. That's number 1, 2, and 3. They will never have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that.
But we see illegal migrant arrests at airports, sir.
Arrests?
Well, we see ICE arresting illegal migrants.
Yeah, that's why the Democrats are going crazy. Because they've allowed, by what they did, and hold up, we put ICE, who are a very high level, I mean, they really are a high level group of people. And they love it because they're able to now arrest illegals as they come into the country. That's very fertile territory. But that's not why they're there. They're really there to help.
Are you talking to Iran directly? No.
They are. Thank you.
What about the Spanish news? Who's going to be in control of that?
That'll be opened very soon if this works.
How soon? And control of it? Will Iran still be able to control it from the oil?
Be jointly controlled.
By who?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
Will the United States make
Me and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah. Look, and there'll also be a form of a very serious form of a regime change. Now, in all fairness, everybody's been killed from the regime. They're really starting off. There's automatically a regime change. But we're dealing with some people that I find to be very reasonable, very solid. The people within know who they are. They're very respected. And maybe one of them will be exactly what we're looking for. Look at Venezuela, how well that's working out. We are doing so well in Venezuela with oil and with the relationship between the president-elect and us. And maybe we find somebody like that in Iran.
You think there are going to be more options to lower the price of oil while we talk?
The price of oil will drop like a rock as soon as a deal is done. I guess it already is today. No, we have a very serious chance of making a deal. That doesn't guarantee anything. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm not going to come out here in a week or 2 weeks and have you all say, oh, you said, I didn't say anything. All I'm saying is we are in the throes of a real possibility of making a deal. And I think if I were a betting man, I'd bet for it. But again, I'm not guaranteeing anything. They want to make a deal very badly. Thank you.
What changes would you like to see in DHS under Barclay Mullen?
Well, he's going to be fantastic. He'll make his own change. He's already given me a list of people he wants to bring. He's a fantastic guy. I think he's just the right guy. You all know him. He's a very open, smart guy, very successful actually in business, which people don't know. And he's a friend of mine. I think Mark Wade is going to be fantastic. Thank you. They made a mistake. It's a dangerous business. That's terrible. Thank you.
All right. Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and simulcasting on X Spaces. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please share the links. Ask your social media to follow me. You can go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and you can also see the live stream with the larger screen and with the telemetry. There's two versions on my website. So you can watch the live stream and the telemetry on my website or on YouTube. But everything is live streaming right now, so thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. It is 10:05 New York time. Markets are open. Let's take a look at what's going on in the markets. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,615, and VIX is trading at 2457. The news this morning was that Trump is postponing hitting energy generation facilities in Iran. He postponed it for 5 days. He's stating to the press that there are some negotiations that are taking place between the United States envoy and Iran's decision makers, whoever they are. We don't really know who they are, but there is these discussions that are taking place to try to de-escalate. The question is this Trump chickening out again, the taco trade? Trump always chickens out. That's why it's called taco. Or is this really going to take hold? So oil futures trading radically went down. It was trading as much as 101, 102 for WTI early this morning, and it's now trading at $88.69 a barrel. Natural gas is trading at 2.947. It was trading at 3.1. So energy is definitely responding positively to the news. And also equities are trading positively with the news. I still have a target of 7,400 to 7,800 for the S&P 500 by year end. If we see a de-escalation of this conflict near term, we're going to see the VIX go below 20. If within the next 5 days or after the 5 days expires and conflict continues and the Strait of Hormuz is still clogged up, then oil is going to go back up and we may see a VIX approaching 45. And equities will sell off and test the 6,450 mark. There's a major support level at 6,450 for the S&P 500. There's also another support level at 6,600. We broke that support level Friday, but today we're back slightly above it at 6,622. So we may reestablish a 6,600 support level again. But if bad news comes out of the Middle East, equities are going to test the 6,450 mark. So just keep that in mind. All right, now in terms of currency, Euro USD is trading at 116, and the Japanese yen is trading at 158.43. Bitcoin is trading at 71,800. Now, since oil is responding to the news, the leveraged ETFs like SCO are benefiting from the news. And that's shorting oil as an ETF, leveraged ETF to short oil. To long oil, you would use UCO if you think oil is going to go up. Now, UCO dropped quite a bit intraday, early in the morning, pre-open for New York, but during the European session, after hours, it dropped a lot. Okay, with that, because there's a lot going on with the news here, let's listen in to CNBC and their take on what's going on with Trump.
If I meet the Ayatollah, I mean, how seriously can you take that? But it would be open.
I mean, you have to think that it factors into the negotiations. That has been
wreak havoc on the entire oil industry. So, look, if there's going to be a resolution to this, there needs to be a resolution to the fact that they can do that.
Well, one would expect if there's a ceasefire, they will stop
blocking it.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's hope.
Yeah. Let's get more on this market rally and bring in Rashir Sharma, Chairman of Rockefeller International, CIO of Breakout Capital. Rashir, I mean, just this morning, a lot to talk about. What's your take in terms of what all this means?
The piece that I've written this morning for the FT was the fact that America keeps bailing out Trump. And which really means is that what Trump gets away with here is America's pre-existing strengths, and something that Sarah was mentioning to just now, which is that because America has been energy independent, and the fact that the rest of the world is so much more dependent on energy, this crisis has really hurt the rest of the world a lot more. And it's quite telling that if you look at countries in Asia, we're seeing such a big impact. In countries like India, there are gas shortages. There are Thailand, Philippines. These other countries are shortening their work weeks, school closures. So it's been quite devastating for the rest of the world. So the logical conclusion is that if this crisis ends, as President Trump seemed to suggest this morning, it really means that the rest of the world also gets to benefit more because they'll be ravaged a lot more by this crisis.
Yeah, that's an important point. Europe in particular, where energy prices have been moved up far more sharply than they have here. What do you see as the impact over there and on the equity markets over there as well?
No, as I said that, like the trend of those international markets outperforming was reversed over the past month. But if this crisis ends, then that trend should logically resume. I think the bigger question that we have to ask is the fact that that is the American market just going to go back then to its rallying ways? Because as we had discussed a couple of weeks ago, I think there are other issues that the market is dealing with, whether it's got to do with the excesses of private credit, the AI mania which is going on there. So I think that yes, we're very intensely focused on this crisis. It matters a lot for international markets even more that if this crisis ends. I think the international markets snap back even more quickly. But I think that the bigger problems will remain, and that I think is getting lost a bit in this entire focus just now on the crisis.
Okay, we can talk about that, but just first on the whole Iran trade, do you think the bond markets around the world are getting too I don't know, expecting of rate hikes in places like Europe? If we do see some sort of resolution to this, wouldn't that change the prospect for? Right. I mean, like
if we have an immediate resolution or a very soon resolution to the crisis in the Middle East, then the inflationary expectations are going to go down, and it opens up the window for the Federal Reserve to lower rates, especially because the job market is softening. The Federal Reserve is worried that perhaps there's going to be an inflationary spike due to higher energy costs. The reality of the situation is that historically, the Federal Reserve does not tighten in an energy crisis. So the chances of them raising rates, even if there is a conflict and energy starts to go up and it's raising the cost of goods, there's also going to be on the other side of the equation, another variable that's part of this equation is that jobs will probably start to falter too. And the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate. And that's job creation and also keeping the cost of goods relatively stable. So they probably are going to lean into the soft job market and not so much rising energy costs, because to my understanding of the history of the Federal Reserve, it is rare or never has happened where they actually raised rates in the middle of an energy crisis. All right, so with that, let me just plug a couple products, help support the channel. All these videos that I do are for free. I believe in sharing my thoughts for free. I don't put it behind a paywall. So please help support the work by getting the great products that I offer. If you would like, you can also donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. Please go to my store and get the structural nano silver soaps. What I have in stock right now are the lemongrass and the peppermint soaps. These will help to improve your skin and the pores of your skin. Also, it helps to neutralize because of the structural nano silver. That's really important, especially during the cold season. But you should use these soaps every day. I use them every day. Magnesium and zinc helps with brain function, boosts up your immune system, and magnesium increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. You should be taking it every day. And brain function is super important. So make sure you take supplements that are improving your brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with the skin, boosts up the immune system, and helps with brain function. You can take them together or you can take them separately, but getting a good dose of magnesium each day is super important. Also, I have structural nano silver lozenges and drops. We're getting into the allergy season. It's really important to mitigate any throat irritation you may be having. You can get it in honey and lemon. You can get it in cherry flavor and also blueberry. And for the lozenges, I also have manuka honey and orange splash with vitamin C. Make sure you get a few bags for your household and for work. You never know when you need them, but this will help to mitigate any throat irritation and neutralize because of the structural nano silver in here. That's really important because other lozenges, they don't neutralize, they just soothe. This will help to soothe and to neutralize. So this is going to help to boost up your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, with that said, let's listen into Live Now on their take of extending the deadline by Trump.
I'm Steve Ballmer, former Microsoft CEO and a basketball fanatic. But more than anything, I'm a data guy.
Thanks for staying with us here at Live Now from Fox. We are continuing to follow everything having to do with the developments in the Middle East. One of the major headlines and biggest concerns around the globe continues to be disruptions at the Strait of Hormuz. On this Monday, we do have this live look at the radar system that shows some of the traffic there in the strait. And just a reminder that a few moments ago, we brought to you the breaking news that President Trump has said that U.S. and Iranian officials have been discussing and meeting for negotiations behind the scenes. Now, President Trump making that announcement on his Truth Social website today, just hours ahead of a deadline later in the day for Iran to completely open the Strait of Hormuz. Just a little background as to what these oil prices are looking like. They did remain stubbornly high in early trading. The price of Brent crude, which is the international standard, at around $112 a barrel. That's up nearly 55% since Israel and the U.S. started the war back on February 28th by attacking Iran. Joining us now to the program here to break all of these trends down and offer some insight as to what we can expect is going to be Rocky Weitz. He is a professor of practice and maritime studies at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Rocky, good morning.
Good morning.
So, Rocky, I've had you on here a few times since this war.
Rockward, that's his first name, Rockward, or Rocky. He's actually an interesting analyst dealing with this crisis. And the Fletcher School, Tufts Fletcher School, is actually pretty prestigious to go to. So he's a professor there. So that's just the backstory here.
Broke out. You heard it. Over 50% oil prices have gone up since the start of this war. So you have been optimistic that, it's going to get better. But is this specifically one of those instances where we see things be worse before they get better? Or is it possible that these prices become embedded when we look at just some of this trajectory?
Well, all right, I don't know what he's going to say, but let me just give you my take on this, all right? Before, and then we'll do a compare and contrast. Energy prices want to go down. There's a built-in innate momentum to want to go down. What's keeping them up is the crisis in the Middle East. All right. Now, traders are like going, okay, what's the probability of it going up and what's the probability of going down? Now, I made the money going up, and now traders are like going, okay, now I got to try to make the money going down here. So this is the reason why the momentum is to try to move oil downward. Okay. Now, it's very possible that what Trump is negotiating behind the scenes, and maybe we're creating a government over there, and they're just trying to find some seeds to discuss and talk to and then fund, and maybe we set a new regime there. Who knows who Trump's talking to? He's not really saying. So if we can stabilize the region, keep the strait open, and have those tankers flow in and they don't get hit and they can get insured, and the refineries stay open for downstream products like diesel and petrochemical and fertilizer. A lot of people aren't paying attention here. April is going to be the planting season. If they don't have the fertilizer, that means in the fall, you're going to have low yield. So it's really important to solve this problem like pronto, because we will have a yield crop problem. And the futures in corn and wheat and soybeans are going to skyrocket. And then not only that, also meat will get more expensive. So because the feed for the cattle are going to be more expensive, and therefore when they slaughter the cattle, the prices at the grocery store are going to be more expensive. So agriculture, if this problem isn't solved, we're going to have problems with big ag. All right. Now, so there's a desire for traders to move the market down. There's a higher probability of the market going down than going up.
This is the reason why it dropped from high 90s, 98 to 88. It dropped $10 in less than 12 hours. That's pretty fast. All right. So the market wants to go down. It's very possible that this will bounce back up to the low 90s, 94 range, if the news within the next 5 days shows that there's not really resolution to opening up the Strait of Hormuz. If there is resolution, then we're looking at high 70, mid 70 WTI for oil futures. So that's my take on it. Let's listen to the professor from the Fletcher School from Tufts. Again, very prestigious school. Let's listen.
I think the answer is it depends on the market. It depends on the region. Let me tell you what I mean. So there's no question for all global markets, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I think that the next 24 hours may be the most consequential of the Iran war for energy prices this year. So we're all going to be paying attention to what happens when this deadline comes up this evening. So that's number one. So I think unlikely to get better this week. What happens in the next month, I think, is very interesting. And I think like I mentioned, I think it really depends on the region. So the United States, Canada, and Mexico are probably the most insulated from any long-term disruptions to either the Strait of Hormuz traffic or the oil and gas production facilities in the Arabian Gulf or Persian Gulf.
Right. Let me just interject. This is the reason why the war in Iran was heavily planned. It's been planned for more than 5 years. That means that Biden's administration and Biden's Pentagon were part of the war plan. Now, of course, it was tweaked, but this has been in the works for 4 to 5 years. And this is the reason why we had to take Venezuela first, because we needed the heavy crude for Pad 3 and Pad 2, which is where we produce downstream products in the Midwest and in the South. Pad 3 is Texas and Louisiana primarily. And they need the heavy crude. And that heavy crude is either coming from Venezuela or the oil sands from Canada. And Pad 2 is the Midwest. Now, because we were able to control the heavy crude, because we don't make much heavy crude, we make light sweet crude, we are insulated from this. And that our refineries aren't going to shut down. Now, others that are dependent on the mid heavy crude from the Middle East, and their refineries are fine-tuned for that type of viscosity of oil. If they don't open up the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to have a problem. This is the reason why the spread between WTI and Brent crude was starting to elevate. Normally it's about $3 to $4, but it was getting to $8 to $10 a spread, where Brent was way higher than WTI. So the question was Brent too high, or was WTI too low, or a little bit of both? But now everything's starting to come back down to its equilibrium. Now, if the negotiations go bad, then we're going to go back up. The oil's going to go back up, and you're going to start seeing more warfare, right? But I think to step back and take a look at the picture, this is not just about your equity positions or the cost of energy. It's the question, are we going to be the generation that gets the job done? Or are we going to be the generation that said, you know what? It took 47 years to get to this point to try to defang Iran, but we only did it halfway. Are we going to be the generation that got her done? Or Or are we going to be the generation that did, well, we got half of it done. I'm concerned. This is because kicking the can down the road is only going to make it worse. And people would say, well, it's going to take a long time for them to have a breakaway for nuclear weapons. We've destroyed their country. Israel and the United States killed their religious leaders, plural. There's going to be a section of society that's these religious Shias that if they have the opportunity to have weapons of mass destruction, they will use it on Western societies. You're talking Europe, you're talking Israel, you're talking the United States, Canada, maybe even some neighbors that were aligned with the United States in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. And the barriers of entry for biological warfare is very low. You can kill half of humanity by developing pathogens in a 1,000 square foot building. How are you going to find that on a satellite? How are you going to find that if it's underground? How are you going to find it when the barriers of entry are so low? This is the reason why you can't have half-hearted measures. So if you think that we went through a really bad crisis in 2020, which it was bad, for many reasons, inoculation and pathogen and the way society didn't do certain things and, but can you imagine a religious community like the Shias that is built into the religion to set the world on fire? All right. Well, you could set the world on fire by using nuclear weapons, but you can also set the world on fire by using a pathogen. Because if you're sick, you get a fever. So there's a hint within the religion that they're going to set the world on fire. The temperatures are going to go up. It doesn't say how the temperature is going to go up. We don't solve this problem. It's either when we're older or our future generations are going to have to deal with a problem because we didn't solve it. So it's better for us to not do half-hearted measures and do taco where Trump always chickens out. And it's better to kill the regime so they never, ever, ever can rise up again. There's not enough people out there to realize this is our modern crusade. Now, people would say, well, the Crusades were, against the Muslims, and it was with the Christians, and it was a Christian, push into the Middle East. This is Western culture versus a theocratic regime that wants to kill everybody because they believe that their leader is the Messiah. This is the modern day crusade. Now, if people don't wake up to this, there's going to be more terror, there's going to be more killing, and they will eventually get a weapon of mass destruction, and it's probably not going to be nuclear. Because the barriers of entry are a hell of a lot easier for biologics than for nuclear. And the Iranians are really smart people. They're not dumb. It'd be nice if the professor from Fletcher School at Tufts said this.
And also any pipeline damage, say, in Saudi Arabia or the UAE. The opposite is true for Asia, particularly China. I think Japan is probably the best positioned of the Asian markets. And then South Korea and China are more vulnerable. Singapore just signed a deal to get some gas from Australia, oil and gas from Australia. So I think they're probably in a better place. India is under a lot of pressure. Europe is also under a lot of pressure. So the Brent crude that you mentioned earlier, which is up 50% since February 28th, that's the European benchmark, global benchmark. The Omani crude, which is really an Asian benchmark, is up even higher. It's approaching $150 a barrel. Whereas in the United States, the West Texas Intermediate, or WTI, is still below 100. And I just checked right before we went on air, and it's down today. So it really depends on the market as far as where the impacts of this will be.
So you mentioned something within that.
With YouTube Music Premium, listen to your favorite songs ad-free. Download music and podcasts to listen offline.
So you mentioned something within that last answer, Rocky. I want to put up a social media post from the White House. So this came over the weekend, right? President Trump posting, if Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants. But things change quickly. I also want to put up this. It's the latest social media post that we had from President Trump just, a few minutes ago, in fact. And Rocky, he says this, quote, I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have had, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. To this point, Rocky, you had mentioned a lot of the pressure that several of these countries are facing here with those continued disruptions. Does that social media post from the president kind of change anything in terms of alleviating pressure?
Yes.
Wow. So that's the first time I saw that. I read it carefully.
Yes.
So,
of course it does. The oil market's going down. The traders want the oil to go down. Why? Because most of the traders actually made the money on the way up. And so and they had to hedge because they didn't know what was going to go on. And their hedge leg is lost money. So now they're dollar costing averaging in the short leg, and they're trying to get out of their position. And they want the oil to go down. So the momentum wants to go down. Now again, it's event risk. Now, the question is, what's going to happen within the next 5 days? Is things going to ramp up? Is Trump just doing a fake? Is Trump kind of setting a coup that's going on? Maybe they're working with a group of people that aren't really officially part of the government, but that if they can get established, they'll overthrow the government and the IRGC? Maybe. We don't know. We have no idea who he's even dealing with. Who's actually the leader of Iran? No one knows. And because they are now decentralized, their whole system to survive is decentralized, it's potentially easy for the CIA to pick a faction that might be more aligned with us and the Israelis to overthrow the IRGC. We have no idea. We may be actually seeing an overthrow play by the CIA. Well, that's a good, I'm not a big fan of the CIA, but the thing is that I do believe that sometimes, like what Machiavelli, mentioned in his book, The Prince, sometimes you have to do something bad to be virtuous. Now, that sounds really paradoxical, but if you look at history, sometimes you have to do some really bad shit to actually bring peace in the world. All right? So there's some weird stuff going on, but as long as we kill off that group of people that could rise up and cause super harm to the world, they have to be destroyed. You can't just try to negotiate this, because if you look at the whole history for the last 47 years, it's been, well, let's negotiate, and then they have a breakout and build out for their military. Oh, then there's some conflict, and then let's negotiate and have peace again. But then they have more runway. Iran has more runway, and then they build out more of their military. But now with AI, what took 20 years to make for the SARS platform, SARS 1 and 2, over 20 years to build that platform. And you have now molecular biology techniques and AI techniques. You no longer need to do physical serial passage to get certain fine tuning to certain receptors. You can do it all in simulation with AI. So what took 20 years to do, you can do in 3 hours. Now do you see the problem? And this is what part of Stargate is doing. Stargate is developing stuff much faster. You can apply it for medical purposes, but you can also apply it for weapon development. So don't you think that the Iranians know how to run an AI system? Don't you think that they'll be able to do training sets and fold proteins and dock those proteins to certain receptors in silico? Don't you think that they'll have an amino acid sequence to have high affinity to certain receptors? Don't you think they can do this? And it doesn't take that long now. In Barrick's lab, because AI wasn't there and CRISPR wasn't fully developed, the early days of the SARS platform, it took years to do with standard enzymes, restrictive enzyme cuts, and serial passage through cell lines in animal models. It took years. AI can do it in days or hours. This is the problem. This is the reason why you have to kill them all. And it's warned in the Bible. Now, some people don't, subscribe to the Bible. Some people only want to read the New Testament and not the Old Testament. Some people want to read only the Old Testament and not the New Testament. Some people read the Quran. Some people read whatever monks read for Buddhism or Hindu. But it's warned in the Old Testament. Don't let Amalek live. Because if you do, you're going to have a problem. Well, guess what? We have a problem.
On the screen here. So I think that probably explains why I didn't see the post, but I saw the drop in WTI or West Texas Intermediate crude prices. It'll be interesting to see if we see a similar trend with Brent, which is the European, but also global benchmark, and then Omani crude, which is a better benchmark for Asia. I think this is smartly timed by the White House to be right before markets open here in the United States.
As of right now, Brent crude is trading at 101 and WTI is trading at 89. So you still have over a $10 spread. It's usually a $4 spread. So the markets are still hinting that there's some sort of dislocation. They're hinting that there's a disequilibrium. And when there's disequilibriums in complex systems, there's big movements that happen. Now, you don't know which way it's going to go, up or down. This is the reason why it's really important. These next 5 days is really important on where energy is going to go, because if they get a head fake and then Trump starts to do further escalatory operations in the Middle East, which I think he should, well, guess what? The strait's probably going to be clogged up and oil's going to go up. But we got to go back, to first principles here. What's more important? Long-term safety or short-term lower prices at the gas station? Now, it always seems like the Gen X has to fix everything. The boomers fucked everything up, and Gen X seems to always have to fix stuff. And what's really strange about generations, they always seem to kind of try to emulate the generation, two generations. Like, for example, Gen X is more similar to the greatest generation. All right. The millennials are more similar to the boomers. Now, I take the stance that the boomer generation fucked up America. You know, I mean, they were at the wheel most of the time, and we have a $38 trillion deficit. All right. So, once again, Gen X has to fix the problem. It's better for us to take the pain and get the job done instead of kicking the can down the road, because the millennials aren't going to do it. They're the boomers. They have the same mentality as the boomers. They're pacifists. So we're going to have to wait for their kids to be similar to the Gen Xers. So we're going to want to wait 20 years, 30 years? Technology is going to allow us to wait because of the barriers of entry for weapons of mass destruction. AI can help us, learn new things and Google faster, or maybe even buy products with an assistant. But AI can develop pathogens at a speed that is super scary. Now, most people don't understand what I'm talking about. But for the ones that are scientifically inclined, you understand the dangers.
Markets really get open in London. And so what they're trying to do is take down the geopolitical risk factor pretty significantly. I think that 5 days period is not surprising, because that positions it all the way through the trading week, where you see the most volume in crude oil trading as well as equities trading. So what this means is, at least for the civilian infrastructure in Iran, it is not going to be attacked by the U.S. military. That doesn't mean the IRGC targets, or the Revolutionary Guard Corps targets that would be along the Strait of Hormuz or other parts of Iran, won't be targeted. But the civilian infrastructure, the power plants, have essentially a 5-day waiting period. I actually think that's a clever move by the Trump White House. So it will definitely help ease the market pressure that certainly has been building over the weekend.
And no worries about that, Rocky. I had just seen that social media post basically a few minutes ago. So we just follow these updates minute by minute as they come down.
Good.
Obviously, we're looking throughout the next several days for these talks, but let's talk a little bit about the current situation. I'm going to bring back up the radar system that we have here at the Strait of Hormuz, taking a look at some of the traffic. So, and I also want to go back to consumer prices, actually, because that's what a lot of people are focused on today. When we talk about some of these costs there involving the passage through the strait, insurance premiums, security costs, what have you, how does that factor into the prices that consumers actually have to pay?
So, build on-ramp assets in no time with Canva's AI-powered design generator. Simply type an idea and watch it appear.
So the actual shipping costs, marine insurance costs, security costs, they play a role, but the bigger role is played by the disruption in the trade, particularly the trade in natural gas, crude oil, and fertilizer. That affects food prices. So happy to discuss any of those.
Well, not just that. And not just that. Helium is also produced. And they need the helium and other gases to make the chips in Taiwan. So the semiconductor industry is faltering if they don't get their supply.
What really consumers are seeing in these changes, what can be attributed to them when they see these prices? Because people just see, a dollar sign going up. But a little bit of background as to why and these specific factors that are causing that kind of price
See what
spike.
I mean? See what I mean? The whole mainstream media, all of it, CNBC, Bloomberg, Live Now, BBC, Al Jazeera, MS Now, Fox News, them all of them. DW, France 24, Al Jazeera, you name them. All of them. ABC, CBC, CBS, NBC, all of them. They're missing the big point here. It's not the cost of oil. It's, are we going to give Iran the time to build weapons of mass destruction? Hello? That's the real problem here. And it's not going to be nuclear. Don't worry about nuclear. Worry about biological.
The direct shipping costs are always actually surprisingly small, and that's just because we've seen, really since World War II, the growth in size of commercial shipping vessels. So an oil tanker today in 2026 can carry at least 10 times what a tanker could in the 50s. And what that means is that the shipping costs, although they have an impact, and certainly marine insurance prices have essentially gone up by 10 times. So that will have some impact. And the tanker rates, how much it costs to charter a tanker has gone up. So that then trickles through the entire supply chain. And it also hits the price of gasoline and diesel. And both of those, especially diesel, actually then drives the cost of transportation in many countries, including in the United States, but also Europe and Japan. And then that cost in additional transportation is passed on by grocery stores and other vendors of food to consumers. One other piece is the agricultural sector. So the agriculture sector relies on fertilizer. A lot of fertilizer is produced as a byproduct of the oil refining process. So the Strait of Hormuz is critical really for kind of three big exports. And it has become very clear in how the market has responded over the last 4 weeks, which is natural gas coming from Qatar. That's number one. Crude oil from a bunch of different areas. Fortunately, there's some pipelines that can help alleviate that across Saudi Arabia and across the UAE. But then fertilizer, and this is really hitting India, Southeast Asia, and others where their growing season, they need the fertilizer inputs, the urea.
Exactly. Now, I have been saying since October 7th of 2023 that there's like this plague that's starting to emerge in the world. All right? Flooding, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Now we're starting to see energy prices going up. You're starting to see potentially food prices going up and food yields going down. We're slowly seeing this kind of plaguing emerge. Now, what is interesting in the Old Testament? When Joseph ended up being a major leader within Egypt, and based on the Jewish tradition, Egypt is a symbol of hell, all right? Golas, all right? So when Jacob and his flocks and his family members in the community were starving in Canaan, Joseph had his brothers and had the father come into Egypt. And Jacob, him going into Egypt or hell, all right, what I'm going to say is really metaphysical here. Going into hell was somewhat comforting. It was an easy going into hell. Something very similar is happening in the world today. We're slowly moving into hell. Why do we assume that when you go to hell that it's just really bad at first. Maybe going into hell is actually kind of a little trick. That going into hell is kind of like almost seems like it solves your problems, famine or whatever. All right. So Jacob is coasted in by Hashem. Jacob or God. Jacob is coasted into hell. And then over time, it gets worse for 210 years or whatever it was. Some people say 400, but it's like 200. I think it's 210. I think that the time that was in Egypt was halved. But okay, let the scholars figure that out. But the point here is that it took time for it to get worse for the Hebrews. Because they weren't even Jews at the time. You know, they were Hebrews. They were coming off of from Abraham. All right. So they were the Hebrews. And what was happening is that it became worse. And the slavery and the burden and so hell became worse over time. Well, the plagues weren't like one right after another, day after day. It actually happened over a year period. But it's possible that we are slowly moving into Golas, slowly moving into hell, like almost a greater Egypt. And that we are slowly getting plagued. So instead of 1 year of the 10 plagues, like in the Bible, it could be over a 5-year period or a 10-year period. And you can almost see how there's an emergent property that's starting to take hold. Now, maybe the delineation point was October 7th of 2023. Maybe the delineation point is farther back. I don't know. But it does seem like there are plagues that are emerging. Famine, floods, disease, radiation. Something big's happening here. And we have to make sure that as a society that we do the right thing. Now, as we approach 9/11/2026, that's Rosh Hashanah. That's the new year for the Jewish calendar. That's big time. That's a big time holiday. That's the holiday where the Jewish people come together and actually proclaim God as king. But if it coincides with the Shabbos, the Sabbath, you can't blow the shofar. And when you can't blow the shofar, you can't silence Satan or Satan. When you can't silence Satan, your blessing from God doesn't come down. Now, curses can happen at an individual level, can happen at a family level, at a community level, at a religious level, at a countrywide level, or a worldwide level. And I suspect that what happened on October 7th of 2023 was a year where Rosh Hashanah coincided with the Sabbath and the shofar couldn't be blown. And there was a curse that took place on the Jewish people. But again, curses can also be at the worldwide level. And usually these things happen in a spiral, like a fib sequence, a golden ratio, where the beginning of the fib sequence, it's tight. So it's a small community. But as that spiral gets wider, it's involving more and more of the people of the world. But that fib sequence is actually the curse. And it comes around at certain periodicities, not every year, Not every Shabbos coinciding with Rosh Hashanah, but when certain things are aligned perfectly, then bam, the curse happens. So when you listen to in the news, well, if we don't get our act together, we could have food shortages. Now, a lot of people would say Americans are too fat anyway, so why does it matter? But you can easily see the emergent property. You can easily see in how there is this build-up of one plague after another that's going to take hold. Nobody's talking about this. Nobody. It takes certain types of people that are the sensitives. I'll call them the sensitives. Some people would call them psychics. Some people just say they're highly intelligent and see pattern recognition that other people don't see. However you want to define it, doesn't matter. But there are people that are picking up on this. And something bad's coming. And it's going to affect everybody.
For things so that their agriculture industry can essentially plant on time. And so all of that putting price pressure on food, price pressure because of the refining on gasoline prices globally.
And people are going to say, well, we have storage, we have food storage for corn and wheat. We have about 3 years supply. So if we have a bad yield, no big deal. Yeah, but what if you have flooding, or what if you have a drought and maybe it's multiple years? See, there's other variables that can happen within this curse that can make it a lot worse. So what could we learn from the Old Testament? All right. There were 7 years of good and 7 years of bad. There were very plump cattle, but then they were devoured by the emasculated cattle. Don't assume that your blessing that you've had for many years is going to remain. Because mankind, and I mean everybody, you, me, everybody, the religious, everybody is at fault.
Actually, the United States has had sort of the smallest increase in gasoline or diesel prices of all the major economies. I should say U.S., Canada, and Mexico share that advantage because we have so much domestic production here. We have a lot of domestic refining capacity here. Natural gas prices in the U.S. have stayed flat, even gone down a little bit. So on the natural gas front, the U.S. is in a better position as well. So really what we're talking about here is for those critical inputs and where the inflationary pressure is most acute are on those countries that rely most heavily on the trade through the Strait of Hormuz. And those are number one, Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, number two, Europe, and lastly, really, the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Rocky, there's a lot to keep up with, a lot of developments. As you see here, it comes down minute by minute. At the start of this conversation, you had mentioned that the next 24 hours really going to be crucial in terms of this conflict, this war with Iran. It's hard to predict.
He said the 24-hour comment before he knew that Trump made that statement about postponing. It's the next 5 days. What's going to happen? That's the big thing when it comes to the oil prices. But it's even bigger. April 1st is at sundown is Passover. So we're like in the middle where Western culture is going up against Shias, negative Esau. And we're playing around with should we kill negative Esau or not. If we make the mistake and we don't kill Amalek, we are going to have a curse. Now, makes you wonder. Now, what's going to happen between now and actually sundown by April 1st, the first night of the Seder of Passover? Now, we're already in this kind of like theme of plagues. We're already in this kind of theme of, you gonna do the right thing or not? If you take a look, you pay attention to the New Testament, right? In the story of the New Testament, the whole Jesus story is revolving around Passover. Something big's coming. Something big's coming. Now, will Western society do the right thing? Or are we in the United States going to go, we should be pacifists and America first? America first, pacifists. Why not America first and we're gonna conquer Gaul? Why not? Why can't we find our inner Julius Caesar and kick ass? No. We gotta be America first pacifists.
Happen even in the next hour or so. So really final thoughts here for our viewers that are really concerned about these prices. They're concerned about when they're going to go down, and just maybe overall thoughts of what you're watching closely as someone who is...
Honey, why don't you worry about getting the job done, not worry about the oil price? Because that's exactly the reason why we didn't do it for 47 years. Oh, you remember the Iran hostage crisis? Do you remember the Beirut bombing, where we lost our Marines? You remember the tanker wars? You remember that Reagan didn't want to escalate it because he was afraid? What about the IUDs when we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan? What about the open borders in Europe and in the United States where caliphates are starting to take hold? Don't believe me? Take a look at Hamtramck, Michigan and Dearborn, Michigan. Hell, New York City, the place of 9/11. We're never supposed to forget, yet we have a mayor that is a communist, but not just a communist, he's an Islamic communist. And he had his staff eat on the floor with a bunch of rugs in Gracie's mansion, the mayoral mansion. Wait a minute here. The last time I looked, if you go to finishing school, you eat at a table with a knife and a fork, because that's what we do in Western culture. Now, if he doesn't like it, he doesn't have to be in the United States. But that's who we are. That's us. We eat at the table. We don't eat on the floor. What the fuck is wrong with this guy? What is wrong with New York to allow this to happen? Oh, it was a bunch of ultra liberals that don't want to, they feel bad. They want to be apologetic to the colonialism. Well, wait a minute here. Right in the Quran, part of the religion is colonialism. That's what the caliphate is, based on definition. Don't we have a problem here? It's a battle of civilization. Do you want to lose or do you want to win?
Is in really tracking all of these maritime headlines.
Wow. All right. I'll try to be brief. Very hard question, and we'll see how I do it. So I'm still optimistic, which might surprise a lot of people. I'm particularly optimistic for U.S. Gasoline prices. I think those will fall first. And I think probably within 30 days, we'll start to see that trend going down. We'll see if I'm right about that. It really depends what happens in the next 2 weeks.
All you got to do is take a look at the futures market in the futures curve. All right, it's backwardate. There's backwardation, meaning contracts in the future, not just the 30-day contract, but 60-day, 90-day, 120-day, they're all lower. So that means that based on the information today, the futures market is telling you that oil's going to be going down, not up. Now, if it was in contango, that's the opposite, where the price in the future, 120 days out or 90 days out or 60 days out, it's higher. than the current future contract. We're in backwardation. So now things could change. New information could reset the curve, but it would take a whole lot of momentum to do that. And that's what I mean. Traders, the momentum is the oil is going to go down, not up. Now, there may be some spiking, there may be some short-term volatility, but long-term, it's going to go down. So if you have a backwardation curve, why don't you kick ass and kill the regime in Iran? Because the futures markets are saying you're not going to have elevated oil prices for very long. But, that's just me. Mr. Common Sense.
I would say following that, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, which are form the southern coast of the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf. They call it the Arabian Gulf. Iranians call it the Persian Gulf. It's an ongoing linguistic dispute. But basically, they have been pushed into the U.S. corner because Iran has been attacking, or I should say that IRGC has been attacking oil facilities, refineries, fertilizer plants. They've even threatened desalination plants. So that's putting a lot of pressure on those countries as well as those markets.
Remember the plague I was talking about? It's not just agriculture, but it could be thirst. You may be having shortages of water, or maybe there will be floods. Well, wait a minute here. If things escalate, you may be having facilities blown up, desalination plants. Well, when you have that problem, guess what? You're not going to have too much water to drink.
Say one last point. I think that the wild card in all of this, which we could see unfold depending on what happens this week, would be the Houthis down in Yemen, who are an Iranian proxy group. And I think if those civilian infrastructure facilities, the power plants and other things were to hit the civilian population in Iran, I think that would turn the domestic population more against the United States and Israel versus, just targeting the IRGC, that's the Revolutionary Guard Corps within Iran. But then you would see potential disruptions in the Red Sea, which has been a huge relief valve to oil markets, particularly in Asia and Europe, because Saudi Arabia has this massive pipeline that can do 5 million to 8 million barrels across Saudi Arabia. And then once it's in the Red Sea, it can go up through the Suez Canal to the Mediterranean and European markets, or it can go down through what's called the Bab el-Mandeb into the Indian Ocean to Asian markets. That Bab el-Mandeb could be disrupted like we saw over the last couple of years, and that would be an additional shock to the oil market. So it's really, we're in the fog of war, and it's very hard to predict out, but I would say in 30 days, I think things will have stabilized, and we'll see if I'm right about that.
We'll have to see. Rocky White's professor of practice maritime studies.
All right, let me plug some products. Please help support the work that I do, because I think I'm giving you a unique perspective on things. Please go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. You got to get rid of this brain fog, all right? You got to get rid of this brain fog of the pacifist America first, all right? Clarity Factor is going to allow you to concentrate so you can kill the regime in Iran, all right? So you can, focus on the tasks. And what you're going to be able to do by focusing on tasks at work or, in school or whatever, or even if you're retired, by being able to focus, you're going to be able to be more productive. But not just that, you're going to be able to sleep better, and you're going to be able to improve the neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is when the dendritic connections can modify between neurons. The more neural connections you have, the faster you think and the better your memory. When you get older, it starts to recede. Your neurons recede. You have less connections, less blood flow, right? Well, you want to improve the blood flow, improve the microenvironment for growth factors, and allow those dendritic connections to reconnect and to improve, so you have more cognition. So you're going to be able to think faster, and you're going to have better memory by taking the Clarity Factor. Drink it with filtered water, take it every day, so you can concentrate, get rid of that brain fog. You'll notice that you'll also be sleeping better. and your memory is going to improve. Now, Goodnight Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, and GABA passion flower that will help you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep. That's super important to help to slow down the aging process. Now, why does it work? It works by allowing you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep. And when you're in that deep sleep and REM sleep, you're consolidating memory. When you have sleep deprivation, your memory goes. Why? Because you're not consolidating memory. You need to be in deep sleep to do it. All right? So, okay, now with your consolidating memory, but with also being in deep sleep and REM sleep, you're detoxifying your central nervous system. So if you're sleep deprived, you're collecting a lot of garbage in your central nervous system. That's bad, because if you're creating a lot of garbage in your central nervous system, you're creating inflammation. When you're creating inflammation, your neurons aren't as healthy. When your neurons aren't as healthy, your neurons start to recede, and the neurons start to produce less energy, less neurotransmitters, and they start to fold proteins in the wrong way. And when you have too many proteins that are misfolded, that have beta sheets, what is called a beta sheet for the amino acid sequence, they start to build up plaque, so you start to get amyloidosis. Now you know why people start losing their mind when they get older. It's really important to keep that inflammation down, keep the mitochondria healthy, and to improve that neuroplasticity. Now, Goodnight Formula is also going to help you to be well rested, because you're in that 3 to 5 cycle of REM sleep. So you do this regularly, you take it at night, you're going to slow down the aging process, your memory is going to improve, your central nervous system will be detoxified, and you'll have more energy. If you don't do it, you're going to get stupid. Ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root controls your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. When you do that, you're bringing down inflammation. That helps your cardiovascular system, that helps with brain function, that also helps with your immune system. Because if you're overinflamed, you're going to build up more plaque. If you're overinflamed at the cerebral level, you're going to have neurons that don't work very well. And if you have chronic elevated cortisol levels, your immune system is suppressed. You don't want to do that. So take the ashwagandha root, boost up that immune system, help with your cardiovascular system and brain function. Lignans soaks up free radicals, brings down inflammation, helps the immune system, the endocrine system, brain function, and the cardiovascular system for the same reasons that I just mentioned. It's that simple. You do that every day, you're going to age slower. All right, let's listen into Al Jazeera.
It doesn't work. There is no better way, and the things could get worse.
Russell said that joining us from Riyadh. Well, while Trump is talking of postponing strikes and ramping up diplomacy, the Israeli military says it has launched a new wave of attacks targeting, quote, the heart of Iran. Heavy strikes across the country on Monday. Emergency crews.
I want to go to CNBC. This is breaking news. They're interviewing Cohen, which was a previous Secretary of Defense.
Was really very dangerous to us, to our troops, to the region, and to the world market. And so I was pleased to hear the president at least step back for a pause. Now, whether that pause is for buying time to get our Marines really ready to go in and take over Clark Island or not, or whether there are some discussion taking place behind closed doors that find some kind of a pathway to a peace in the Middle East, one that will carry risk. But the question becomes, how much is the United States, Israel, the countries in the region willing to tolerate? Because they're never going to be absolute security, but what is the risk level that they are willing to live with? And that's something we have to be negotiating and talking about. So I'm pleased that the president has paused.
Why?
At least for 5 days.
Why? Why? Why can't we just kill the IRGC and the theocratic regime and make sure that there's a constitutional republic that's booted up in Iran? And they can use our constitution, our pillars of government, as a model. We can stabilize their economy with the flow of energy. We can stabilize their currency with the IMF and the World Bank. We can guarantee elections through the UN, and we could probably have a council of 5 the 5 important nations, the United States is one of them, right? As a means of kind of like coaching them into a constitutional republic. A big part of Iran is secular. A big part of Iran is educated. A big part of Iran actually aligns with Western culture. Why can't we have that? Why can't we just force it? Why can't we look in the mirror and say, we're Julius Caesar and we're going to win? Why can't we do that? No, we got to sit back and go, well, maybe there's some risk that we're going to be able to manage and be able to live with. We'll just control their nuclear weapon development. That doesn't solve the problem, because you still have the Shia craziness where they want to light the world on fire. That doesn't solve the problem of them reaching escape velocity with biological weapons. You got to kill it. This was warned to not just the Jews. This was warned to all of humanity. Amalek must die. All of humanity has been warned on this. So we don't get the job done. Don't be surprised that the big curse happens. Another pacifist.
Soon, we are working through the Omanis. The Omani leadership over the years has been a moderating force in the region. They talk daily and have talked daily to the Iranians. And so I assume that whatever negotiations are taking place, using them as the medium and the communicator to our positions and to those of the Iranians.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is who is calling the shots over there? Because the Strait of Hormuz is still effectively blocked, right? They are controlling that. There's still missiles coming over, not as much. So how do we judge the success of the operation?
Well, it's going to take some time to negotiate that. It's going to take forces in the region. I am hoping that we don't have to deploy the Marines to take over Kargat Island. Marines are great at carrying out whatever mission we give them, but simply taking the island and then occupying it is not.
Oh, wait a minute. We got to remember, former Secretary of Defense, War, Cohen, that's speaking. Did you solve the problem in Iran, or did you make it worse? No, he didn't solve the problem in Iran at all. So we're going to take him at face value? What the fuck? We are in the situation we are in because of people like him.
Marines will carry out that mission, but the question will be, what is the cost in blood? Certainly in treasure. What is the cost in blood? Those young men and women are our prime asset. We have great.
When you're looking at a project in finance, you have to create what is called the net present value, the NPV. You got to figure out what your cash flows out will be, what your cash flows in will be over the duration of the project. You determine if you have a positive NPV or not. Now, in this case, what we have to do is not just look at how many people are going to die, how much money we have to spend, but you also have to look at the risk-reward ratio. You have to make an assessment that if you don't get the job done, is this going to cause a problem later down the road? And the answer is yes. If you don't get the job done, there is going to be a much bigger issue that we have. You think after going through this and that the Shias are gonna forget? And of course not, they're not gonna forget. And they're gonna have animosity to Western countries, and also they're gonna have animosity to Sunnis. So now, because we didn't get the job done, we're gonna literally accelerate the Mog and my Mog, accelerate Armageddon because we weren't willing to get the job done. Trump is blessed. The guy survived 2 assassination attempts. But he was meant for this moment in time. We'll never have a president like this ever again. If we don't get this job done now, it will never happen, and it's going to get worse. Stupid, stupid, stupid. All right, let's go to Al Jazeera. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in the powdered form or the veggie cap form. A good probiotic is going to help to bring down inflammation at the gut level, improve your immune system, improve your metabolism, even your brain function. A lot of people don't realize a good gut biome actually improves your brain function. You'll be able to sleep better. You're going to be detoxifying your body. You're going to be able to consolidate memory. And you're also going to improve the communication between your gut and your liver. So that's really important. So please go to my store, get the probiotics, either in the powdered form, which is the one I usually take, or the veggie cap form. But take it every day, super important. Good gut health also improves your skin. So if you have skin problems, most likely it's because of your gut.
Telling the truth?
Akiva, I also want to get your views on how this conflict is likely to be viewed. I'm not using the past tense just yet, but by the Israeli electorate, given what's happened in Gaza with Hezbollah, where Netanyahu has not really been able to fulfill its objectives and actually declare victory. And you've got the election in October.
Yeah, for Netanyahu, actually, this war, as well as the war in Gaza, was the best deal he could have. You know, President Trump was talking about the deal. The best deal that Netanyahu could have is a war that will take him off the hook, and now he will have to go back to the real life and go back to the courtroom, and testify. And he knows that
our democracy.
He's not in a very good position there. As long as there is a war and tension, the Israeli public does not demand that Netanyahu will pay the price for corruption. Now, ending the war with Iran means for Netanyahu going back to campaign. There will be elections no later than October, and the opposition will not be able also to aggravate or to say anything that will get President Trump angry. And, you know, it's all about his ego, because if they win the elections, they will have to live with him for at least another 2 years. So Israel is, you know, was bragging about the fact that it's a sovereign state, independent state, the only democracy in the Middle East. And what kind of democracy is it when Israel has to take into consideration, strategic consideration, the ego of the American president?
Hamid Reza, what about the egos in Tehran? How do people there respond to Donald Trump here? And he says he's got an important and trustworthy interlocutor without mentioning him, because that may mean that he'll be killed. Now, the thing is, surely no deal is possible there from a regime which has really lost a lot of its top dogs, as it were, without the IRGC being on board and their hard line.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's at the core of the issue. I'm also not sure who President Trump is talking about. There have been some speculations in social media. I'm not sure to what extent, if at all, they can be taken at face value. But the problem is here is that there's zero trust, I can say, towards the United States overall, and especially President Trump, because so far, twice, and not just once, at the middle of the negotiations, the United States decided to first greenlight Israeli invasion of Iran, and the second time to initiate an invasion. So I see a lot of skepticism in these past couple of hours.
regarding any kind of prospects for diplomacy at this stage. What I can say for sure, based on me following the strategic debate in Tehran, and actually this was something I was reading right before joining you from a well-known pro-government expert. He was talking about an equation of normalization for normalization, like normalizing Iran's economic interactions in exchange for Iran normalizing the passage of ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So they have clear demands, what they want from any deal. But what President Trump has been saying has been rather vague and general. So I'm not sure if he's telling the truth here or just buying time for, especially, given the recent deployments of troops toward the Middle East, that he's buying time for another phase of escalation, actually.
Yeah, and Akivalda, what are you making of what input perhaps Netanyahu's had in all this, if any? I mean, has he surprised everybody by perhaps leaning on Donald Trump to launch this war, and he did it unilaterally? Do you think that Donald Trump is paying him back?
Well, it looks like the tail is wagging the dog, and this is not the first time. Well, people remind us now. I remember when Netanyahu went to the Congress in 2002. He was at that time he didn't have any official position, but he went there and
it's not just Netanyahu; it's the lobbying group. The Israeli lobbying group is too connected and too entrenched in American politics. But you can't just blame the Israeli lobbying group. You have to blame our representatives in Congress and in the Senate. They're the ones that were bought off. So who's really at fault? The Israeli lobbying group or the way our politics works in Congress?
More and more articles in the American media, and we hear more politicians that are sending anti-Semitic messages that here again the Jews are dragging the United States and the world into war because it's their interest. And Netanyahu, I think, went a little bit too far with that, with his taking credit for convincing the American president to join Israel. So we still don't know the full story. But once it will turn out that Netanyahu is the one who dragged the president of the United States to a war that cost the American people so much. And since we know that this American president really doesn't have clear strategy, as he said, he is Mr. Deal, making a deal. And Netanyahu, was also a salesman. He started as a salesman of furnitures, and he's very good at marketing. And he marketed to the president of the United States. Nobody else could say that if the United States will not attack Iran, Iran will attack the United States. And it's not about Israel, it's about the strategic interest of the United States of America. And what happened is the president of the United States was left alone. No other leader from the West has agreed to join. And another thing is that the Abraham Accords that were seen as an asset to the Gulf countries, and Saudis were considering joining them, became a nuisance. It was a good pretext, reason for Iran to strike them.
Akiva Eldar, thank you so much. Israeli political analyst joining us from Tel Aviv, and from Berlin we had Hamid Reza Azizi visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Thank you both. Right,
All right. It's amazing how all these experts, they keep on missing like the big picture. We're going to go to Fox Business. This clip is about Trump pushes bold plan as China race quickly escalates. Code Red moment is the name of the clip. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the omega-3. This is going to bring down inflammation, help your lipid profile. Now, when you take omega-3 every day, what you're doing is you're improving your cardiovascular system, reducing plaque formation. That's really important because you're going to be able to reduce that inflammation at the intima of your blood vessel, and you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. And so therefore you're reducing plaque formation. Super important to take every day. That's why omega-3 is highly recommended to improve your cardiovascular health. And a lot of people don't realize this. In the United States, most people start having vascular disease at age 15. 15, it's asymptomatic. But at age 15, you start cardiovascular problems. It becomes symptomatic late in your 20s or 30s when blood pressure starts to go up. So the earlier that you take care of your cardiovascular health, the better. Vitamin B complex. Very important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. This will help to speed up your metabolism, your cellular metabolism. It'll help to protect your neurons because it has vitamin B12. So it's going to help with your brain function and also your peripheral nerves. You'll notice that your kinematics will be better because you're protecting the myelin sheath of your nerves, your neurons. And the vitamin B complex, the first 4 B vitamins, improves your mitochondria, so you're building up more ATP, which is a major energy source for your cells. Because the first 4 B vitamins helps with the electron transport chain, and the electron transport chain within your mitochondria is what produces your ATP. So that's the reason why you should be taking vitamin B complex. See, some people just say, just take a vitamin, and they don't really understand the mechanics of why it's working. But not only that, it's important to stack. It's not just to take a vitamin, it's to stack it and to have a holistic approach. So, for example, the stack with the vitamin B complex, that's going to help with energy levels and metabolism and protect your neurons. So you're improving your energy levels, which is a major component of slowing down the aging process. And the omega-3 is helping your cardiovascular health, so you have better blood flow. And when you have better blood flow to your hippocampus, guess what? Your brain function is going to be better. So this is the reason why stacking is so important. All right.
This morning, a complete reversal of markets. Take a look. The Dow Industrials right now up 975 points, better than 2%. The S&P up 138, and the Nasdaq up 513 right now, better than 2% there as well. This reversing course entirely after President Trump posted on Truth Social that the U.S. and Iran had a series of, quote, productive conversations over the past 2 days. And based on that, the president has instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period. The president writes that things have been going well and the ongoing conversations will take place. In addition to stocks reversing course entirely, going from down 800 to up 1,100 on the Dow Industrials, oil prices have also reversed course. Take a look. The price of crude now is down 7.5%. It is sitting at $90.95 a barrel. Brent is down 7.75%. That is down to 103.53 on Brent. Interest rates also reversing course entirely. Take a look at the 10-year, where earlier we were looking at a spike in rates. It is plummeting down on this news from President Trump that he has had productive conversations with Iran, and he is hoping to get out of this war. He's intent on doing a deal. The yield on the 10-year down 2.3 basis points, now at 4.36%. Also, the White House rolling out a new national framework for AI to establish a federal standard for the rapidly evolving technology, focusing on 6 key objectives: protect children and empowerment, safeguard and strengthen American communities, respect intellectual property, support free speech, ensure American dominance in AI, and develop an AI-ready and educated workforce. Joining me now is the author of Code Red, Breitbart's social media director, Winton Hall. Winton, good to see you. Thank you so much for weighing in on this. And I know that we are talking about AI and this race to win between the United States and China. You write all about it in this book. But first, give me your assessment of this market here, with the Dow Industrials up 905 after President Trump instructed the military to postpone strikes on Iran for a 5-day period.
No, it's great news for America.
Forge in Flame's spring sale is on, March 6th through April 5th. Save up to $500 now when you claim.
No, it's great news for America, and I think the world, and I think we all want to see this come to a peaceful end and be resolved. And I think also you're seeing that reflected in the markets. And you know, this whole rally that we're talking about right now is going to also affect, as you were talking about, the AI, specifically the Mag 7, the 1/3 of that S&P 500 that's so important as a tentpole. And I think especially now that we have this national policy framework on AI that you were talking about, it's going to set up a glide path for additional growth.
And Winton, I want to get your take on the big takeaway out of your book, Code Red. We know that the AI race against China is heating up. We know China wants to win, and we've got ongoing investment in America into new technology, into data centers. That has been the story. Stanford University reporting that the U.S. is well ahead of China in the private sector, financing in AI, $109 billion invested compared to China's $9.3 billion. Winston, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, we have to win this AI race. President Trump's exactly right, and we need to win it for 2 reasons. One, nobody reports it better than you. The economic part of this, we know the upside, which we just discussed. The downside we saw with the big wipeout of $600 billion to NVIDIA when DeepSeek R1 was released from the China model. So that's the economic piece. But the military and the human side, I think, is just as important, if not more, from a national security perspective. Whoever achieves dominance in the AI race is going to have superiority on the battlefield in things like encryption, cybersecurity, missile system hacking even of infrastructure. And we know that since 2017, the CCP has mandated that they want to, by 2030, we're just 4 years away, Maria, from them wanting to gain global dominance in this race. And so the president's exactly right. We have to win. I think, as I say in the book, we can beat China without becoming China. In other words, we've got to maintain our values. Nobody wants to have a techno-authoritarian surveillance state by any stretch. But we also want to make sure that we win on the battlefield as well as in the economy. And that's obviously why the AI race is so hot right now.
So what do we need to do to continue that? What's your big takeaway from the book, Winton?
Yeah, I think from the book, the key is to understand that AI is not just a tool, it is power. And as Americans, we have to understand that this is going to reshape everything from the way our children are educated to the way that we see in the battlefield and AI warfare. And I also think economically, we've got to be prepared as individuals. But I think there's a huge upside. Look, the future is going to be teaching our children not just to apply for jobs, but how to create them. And that's all about entrepreneurship. And so I think for those people who harness that power early on and really understand how to embrace the upsides and avert the landmines, there's going to be a huge growth opportunity for them economically, and I think personally, and certainly for our nation. So we've got to get serious about it. And I think that's why, you know, you're seeing people come to this conversation and realize, look, this is not hype. This is not a hype cycle. The AI revolution is real, and we got to be ready.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for jobs? Because the worry was that AI was going to eliminate certain jobs. And I think what you're seeing happen here is a new focus on jobs that are not necessary for these higher degrees, like, you know, engineering is one of them, but really electricians and construction workers and things like that are seeing lots of conversation recently. Is that where the job creation is going to be? One thing that's different about AI in terms of technology and its impact of jobs is this technology seems to be impacting white-collar jobs.
That's exactly right, Maria. So, yeah, the growth right now is in the trades, and we're seeing that with this AI data center build out. You're seeing in some cases the pay premium up 30% for, you know, everyone from drywall hangers to electricians, HVAC, and so forth. But there really is a real serious focus on this white collar job replacement. Right now, you've heard the following. You've heard Dario Amodei say that within 12 months, this is not in some faraway future, 12 months to the next 5 years, you're seeing a wipeout of 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs. That's our kids, right? That's our college students who just graduated. They played by the rules. They took out a big loan. So that's a real concern and a downward pressure. The other thing is you're seeing Microsoft AI's CEO Mustafa Suleyman say that within 12 to 18 months, you're looking at the replacement of white-collar tasks for all white-collar jobs. Now, that's not saying that all jobs will go away. What he's saying is the tasks could be automated. And so the question is going to be on how fast do companies diffuse this technology, particularly with AI agents and setting up those automation through agentic AI. And that's going to be a question of speed of implementation. We're going to have to see how fast corporations adopt that. But we've got to get people ready. That's why I call it a code red moment, in the sense that it's an alarm and alert. But also we need a code. We need a set of principles to guide us through this. And, I think that's why it's so important to be keeping an eye on what you're talking about with the market, but especially for our parents and young people, because they're going to be facing a very different job market.
All right, we will leave it there. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Winton Hall.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help to break up proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, reduce the load on your pancreas, and allow you to absorb your nutrients. This also has bromelain in it, which is an enzyme to help to break up clots, and it has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. This is the reason why you also should be taking digestive enzyme complex during the cold, because you need to break up those glycoproteins. Olive leaf extract, dual purpose, brings down inflammation, also helps your lipid profile, helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. This will help to improve your cardiovascular health and help to boost up your immune system. Take olive leaf extract every day. Really important. All right. Let's listen into some other. Let's listen into Fox News here. Iran's missile escalation. Every NATO capital is now under watch. Come on.
Moments ago, President Trump confirming progress in talks with Iran, adding, quote, "I've instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period." Meanwhile, growing concerns over Iran's missiles over the weekend, how far they can actually go after Iran launched ballistic missiles towards Diego Garcia, a U.S.-UK base in the Indian Ocean, 2,500 miles away. So now we know that we've been accusing them of this. They've denied it, and now we know their space program has produced a missile that can go 2,500 miles. So what does that mean? Let's take a look. 2,500 miles, it's the lighter lavender color. First off, what is now in target? I don't think they're going to be targeting Moscow, but it's now targeted. Obviously, all these states are going to be targeted and have been targeted. Now let's expand it a little. Look what goes 1,806 and 11 miles, 1,864 miles. You got the capitals of Rome, Munich, Paris, of Italy, Germany, and France. Suddenly they are paying attention, I imagine. Maybe it is their fight. And of course, in London, where they've decided to just let their military wither. And then we have Oslo and Berlin. Besides that, I think every NATO capital is now under watch. No longer speculation. You can't say America's making it up, because we just watched 2 missiles go 2,500 miles. The first one went the length, knocked down. The other one failed, but was heading that direction. What else can I tell you? How about what the rocket looks like? I'm pretty sure this is not going to bring any astronauts to the moon, but this is what the rocket looks like that goes that far and that long. We know they've made great progress with drones. Now we know they made great progress with missiles. What does that now mean about the danger and the imminent threat? Let's bring in retired Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding. General, were you surprised that they elected to show what they can do with intermediate range missiles?
Absolutely not, and I'm not surprised they went after Diego Garcia. We use that as a staging base for, strikes, bomber strikes in Iran. So I think they're trying to project power. Obviously, it wasn't successful, but what that means is they can have that range. They can someday get to a longer range, and when you pair that with a nuclear weapon, it's not just Berlin; it's New York.
So we've been saying this for a while. Weapons inspectors go back and forth, and we hear rumors and thoughts depending on the president. We decide to approach it differently. Does this actually give the president clarity in order to tell our allies why they need to be involved in this on some level? Why it involves them?
Well, and you can imagine why they're not doing anything. They're worried that those missiles are going to go raining down on their capitals, and they should be worried. Quite frankly, the biggest thing that I fear is that we'll cut this off before we can actually end it. And I think that's the challenge we face. Are we going to allow Iran to continue to develop nuclear weapons and continue to be the biggest state sponsor of terror and grow their missile capability?
So if you allow them to cut up the Strait of Hormuz and then say, okay, sign this document, it's over, they know at any moment they can use that choke point to choke us out again.
Absolutely. And I think if you look at that geographic area, the strait is really kind of reminiscent of the Battle of Vicksburg. The South was blocking shipping going down the Mississippi River. And in this case, that's what their Iranians are doing. So we're going to have to set up something like Southern Watch, but also with an emphasis on drones to protect that area in order to keep shipping flowing while this goes on.
So where would you be targeting? We have 7,000 targeted. We have a lot of success, AI and precision. What would you do? What would you be focusing on, General?
I would be focused on the areas where are the shipping choke points, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And if you route the shipping in a way that you minimize the threat, perhaps we can get the ships flowing again.
What do you mean by that? How do you go through a small strait in a way to minimize risk?
Right. Yeah. So, obviously they're using small drones. Those have a range to them. So if we look at what are the range of the possible weapons they could use, and look at where the choke point is, which is primarily around the Strait of Hormuz, then we can probably create a safe zone that we can get shipping through. And I think they're going to have to be escorted. We're going to have counter drone systems in there, and we're going to have aircraft overhead that can take targets out as they pop up.
So yeah, you would keep them. Would you take an island, or would you take Carg Island, or there's some of the smaller islands around there where a lot of the fast boats dock?
Well, if you look at Carg Island, it's kind of ways up from the Strait of Hormuz. So I would be focusing around the strait, which is a strategic choke point for the Persian Gulf.
All right, so you would not focus that. You would go for the other islands.
Yeah, right. There's a big island right there next to the strait, and some smaller islands. But really, I think what we're looking at is escorts that have counter drone capability, and then also aircraft overhead, reminiscent of Southern Watch, that is there to take out targets as they pop up.
Right, General, how long have you thought about the threat of Iran? And in a way, is this an opportunity for you to see America take down maybe one of its top enemies?
Brian, what's funny is I was on the other side of the screen in 1979 watching the hostage crisis. This has been stuck in my craw since then. I think, Iran has been horrible for the world. It's certainly been horrible for America, and it's a problem that we need to finish.
Finish the job. That's what I get. General, thanks so much. Appreciate it. I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube.
All right, let's see here.
With Canva AI, you'll never design alone again. Just tag in Canva for instant design feedback and suggestions, all from within the app.
Let's get to Mohammed Al-Arian. What are your thoughts, Mohammed? We saw we were down 250 on the Dow. Futures are now up 1,000 points.
It's an important turnaround, Joel, because we were seeing flight to cash as the only safe haven, and that was contracting markets in a significant manner. The big question for me right now is not only do these talks continue constructively, but can you get Israel to buy in as well? Because there are three warring parties in this war. So there's a lot of uncertainty still, but it's much better for markets than what it looked like just 10 minutes ago.
Hey, Mohammed, the idea that Israel would move against the United States at this point, I think they've been surprised and thrilled that the United States has moved in lockstep to support their goals to this point. I would have a hard time imagining that Israel would do something that the United States is saying they don't want to do anymore. But I will say the complexities here, what Iran had been floating that it wanted, are going to be very hard to deliver. They said things like they want the Strait of Hormuz to now operate very differently in the future, that they would like to see everyone have to kind of buy into getting approval from Iran to go through, which I know the Gulf states are not going to go along with. And they want to be assured that they will not have any strikes that come against them in the future. And I think that's a nearly impossible admission for either the United States or Israel. So I guess the details, as always, will be what decides this, but the market is very quickly reading that this is a huge step down in the escalation that we've seen to this point.
It is, especially if you stop the military attacks, as suggested in the president's Truth Social. Political scientists have had enormous difficulty defining an off-ramp that can attract two, let alone three parties to this war. So that's the complexity of it, is that the objectives of the three are not aligned. If the U.S. can force objectives, because right now the U.S. is the only one that can declare victory. The other two cannot declare victory. So if the U.S. can impose its will on the other two, then we have an interruption into something that went from simply disruptions to structural damage that takes years to fix. And as we got to structural damage, we started seeing tipping points in economic and finance.
It's pretty amazing, Mohammed, because earlier, first thing I saw on Market Watch was investors need to know that if they're counting on the top-up trade, it's not going to work this time. And this is exactly, anyone short this market at this point now can feel what a true squeeze is. What's weird about the text and the president's Truth Social comments, Mohammed, every once in a while we heard the president say, yeah, Iran wants to make a deal, but then on the other hand, we hear him say there's no one left to talk to. They're all dead. So there couldn't be talks occurring. This was happening for the last 48 hours. Very good and productive conversations with whom? And what do you think it entailed? You don't know. None of us know at this point. And is it as substantive as you think the president is making it out to be at this point?
We don't know. And you raise an important question. Who are we talking to on the Iranian side? Let's not also forget that as we've eliminated the top layers, command and control has been shifted down to the field, to field commanders who have a pre-existing order to take advantage of, quote, opportunistic targets. So can you control the ground? Can you control the field? There's lots of question marks. But what you see in the market is exactly what you said. People were short. They were positioned for a further escalation because of the 48-hour ultimatum that was given to Iran and the counter threat of Iran, and the fact that Israel started attacking electricity infrastructure in Tehran already. So they were positioned for an escalation, and suddenly you have the possibility of a de-escalation, and the market is reacting violently to that change.
We had just finished talking to Rich Goldberg, and I mentioned the Goldman Sachs forecast, and I almost started laughing when I first heard it, because WT was at 98. So they went out on a limb, Goldman, and said, we think it'll be at 98 for the next month. But then they said for the month after that, 105. And I said, how can you possibly make any determinations when you don't know what the next headline or Truth Social post could be? So we went from 98, where are we now? We're 88, 87 right now. So this totally depends on what happens on the ground between the United States and Iran for the near term.
It does, but I would also add that we have crossed some important economic and financial lines. There has been longer damage. Qatar announced last week that 17% of its LNG production is taken out for a number of years. We've seen other infrastructure. You may miss a whole planting season in the fertilizer story you just ran. Today, I have an FT article suggesting that the flow of funds from the GCC to the rest of the world is not going to be as ample. They've provided $800 billion in the last 4 years for investments elsewhere. That may not be as ample because of the need to invest in your own country, fix your own country, and protect your own citizens. So we are going to see quite a tail in terms of the economic and financial implications that the markets is yet to fully price in.
Mohammed, watching these moves, obviously this is the idea that, okay, we're not facing a deadline that comes tonight, but President Trump likes to move far more quickly than traditional political moves take place. He's extending a 5-day window to negotiate all of this, which gets us either to Friday morning, if that is 5 days from now, or till Friday evening, if that's 5 days from the existing deadline tonight. We could be setting ourselves up for a potential reset of everything this coming weekend if those talks don't move as quickly as he would like to see over the next 5 days.
If not before. So what happens in the next 5 days if whatever central command is left in Iran cannot control the field commanders? What happens if Israel doesn't follow the US? So a lot can happen in the next 5 days, let alone what happens in 5 days. So it's going to be really an uncertain period. And, you know, asymmetrical wars, we've heard this on the air so many times. Asymmetrical wars are really hard to end, especially when you have multi-parties to it. So the next 5 days are going to be critical in seeing whether you could hold the thing together pending these behind closed door negotiations that we just learned about.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin D3. This is a cofactor for gene expression. This will help for your cells to perform properly. Vitamin D3 also helps with bone density. It helps to absorb calcium. If you do resistance training, it's going to deposit bone matrix. Vitamin D3 also helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. And vitamin D3 helps with cardiovascular health. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression, also soaks up free radicals, helps the health of your mitochondria so you'll have more energy. Resveratrol helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Please go to my store, get the resveratrol, slow down the aging process. And this will also help with your basal layer for your skin, so your skin will improve. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
I had to say, not least the fact that he says the US has been speaking to a top respected leader in Iran. Meanwhile, we've heard nothing from the Iranians themselves. So do we take it at face value?
That would be a call that everyone would have to make given Donald Trump's previous experiences. Certainly what we've heard from Donald Trump, there's an element of whiplash to this. On Friday evening, he was talking about how the Iranians wanted a deal. There is no deal. He was continuing to prosecute the war. Then Saturday night here in Washington, we got the Truth Social message saying that if the Iranians threatened the Strait of Hormuz, if they didn't reopen it within 48 hours, then the United States was going to attack their power plants, including the biggest one, and that was going to get underway at some point late on Monday. And then on Monday morning, we get a complete change of tone and a complete different approach from Donald Trump, who said, there's a possibility we could end the war, that there is the reality that we could come to an end here, and no guarantees, but we're talking to the Iranians, and that completely came out of the blue. Now, we're not quite clear who's been talking with whom, whether there is someone who's acting as a mediator. We do know that countries in the Middle East have been talking to the White House over the weekend. We know that the Israelis apparently trying to veto any idea of any sort of deal with the Iranians at this point. But Donald Trump says they're now in discussions. He wouldn't say with whom. He said that there wasn't going to identify him because there was a possibility he could get killed, even though it's the United States that's carrying out operations in Iran. but he was well respected, and things he said had come true over the last few days, so they believe that he is credible. Quite how this plays out in the timescale that Donald Trump has given by saying that there'll be no attacks on the power infrastructure for 5 days isn't entirely clear, but they're continuing to attack targets in Iran. They're continuing to move troops towards the area there. And if we get to Friday, which is the deadline, and we know Donald Trump's deadlines tend to be a bit elastic, that if we get to Friday, then there is the possibility that the war could continue, or if the discussions go well, that the war is over. But someone I've been speaking to over the last hour or so says what Donald Trump is talking about, in public at least, seems to be largely what was on the table when the Omanis were speaking to both sides 23 days ago, which is no nuclear weapons, an end to nuclear enrichment for a period of time, no missile program or a restricted missile program, and other issues would be considered at that point. But they seem to think that this is what was on the table, and Donald Trump may well be agreeing to a deal that was already, the Omanis said, there, all but the signatures 23 days ago.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Something we'll unpick in the rest of this show and in the coming hours. But perhaps just as a recognition that we're not in, by any means, in the realms of a ceasefire at this moment. Something else to bear in mind is that there is a US expeditionary force just days away from the region now.
And there's speculation about what that means. There's some 4,500 Marines, Marine Expeditionary Force, on its way to the region. Certainly the suggestion is that the intention is that it'll take over Karg Island, which of course is a key infrastructure point for the Iranians. It's where a lot of the oil is processed and dealt with. There is also the talk along the coast to protect the Strait of Hormuz. That is a huge undertaking for such a relatively small force in what would be hostile terrain and a country that is effectively fighting for its survival at the moment. So that may not be where they're headed, the Strait of Hormuz, but certainly Karg Island. And it would give Donald Trump the chance to pull them back. Remember, and we've said this so many times over the last 23 days, Donald Trump was the president who said that he wasn't going to get involved in stupid foreign wars, that there was no need to be involved in regime change in other parts of the world. But he's also said that he wouldn't have any qualms, any concerns about putting troops on the ground. He said other presidents won't say that. I'm not going to put myself in the position where I say no troops on the ground. I'm not ruling that out. He said he wasn't going to talk about strategy, which is kind of interesting because Saturday night, of course, he created a great deal of panic by on Truth Social talking about strategy and how he was going to attack those power plants across Iran. That anyone would tell you is a strategic move, and that is talking publicly about strategy. So what happens to the Marines? They're on the way there. What happens next is in the hands of Donald Trump as Commander-in-Chief and his military advisors.
Yeah, all right, Alan, thanks for that. Alan Fish there in Washington, D.C. Let's head to Ali Hashim, who's in Tehran. So, Ali, are we hearing anything yet from the Iranian officials about these negotiations?
Well, 3 hours later, and there's no official statement from the foreign ministry. All what we were hearing were sources, and the sources stopped. The first hour, it was just the first hour we started seeing sources. Then the foreign ministry issued at least a news agency, which is a semi-official, published a sourcing from the foreign ministry with respect to the talks. Then it was deleted and replaced by a source close to the foreign ministry. But for now, we don't have anything that confirms or denies officially what President Donald Trump said. Add to that the other issues, other institutions in the government also are not reacting and they're not commenting. This could just reflect the cautiousness within the system here in Iran. We're very careful now with any signaling, and it could be, given the fact Mr. Trump is saying that
the president is
to a certain person within the system. He is a leader. He's not the supreme leader. He's not the president. and he is not the foreign minister. So there is another person. There are suggestions that this could be the Speaker of the House, Mohammed Bakr Khalibaf, who's very influential. However, this is also another issue to take into consideration, whether this is accurate or inaccurate. No one knows what's coming out from Washington, and whether this
is interesting. This is an interesting point where we're not getting really good feedback from Iran about this negotiation that's taking place. So oil markets now are trading, WTI is trading at $90 a barrel and 37 cents, and natural gas is now trading at 2.94. Natural gas was as low as 2.9, and oil was trading around $88, $87 a barrel. So there is a little bit of a mean reversion going up in oil, probably because there's no real confirmation on, quote, good talks amongst the parties here.
Well, and so the extraction of the 400 kilograms of uranium from under the rubble in one of Iran's nuclear sites, this is an issue itself. The issue of the nuclear program and stopping the enrichment or continuing enrichment, this is another issue. Guarantees that there will be no other war against Iran, and Israel's concerns towards Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, the war in Lebanon. These are all issues that will need months and months to be finalized. And one person, given the fact, my understanding of the Iranian system, it doesn't really make sense that one person can give answers to all these questions.
Yeah, raises a great many questions, doesn't it, Ali? Thanks for that hash there in Tehran.
It could be that Trump is just buying time for the Marines. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This has no fluoride. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at the gum line, help the health of your gum line. Also, it has structural nanosilver in it, so it's going to neutralize. Super important. And good oral hygiene will also help with your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. Super important to take. Get a few tubes of this toothpaste for your household. This is the best toothpaste that you can get. There's nothing better. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Again, this has structural nanosilver to help to neutralize. So it's important to take when you're not feeling well, like during the cold season. Please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver gel. You can get it in the tube form or the quick dispenser form. Make sure you have some at work or at home. You never know when you need it. It's dual purpose. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, apply the gel on your skin. It'll help to heal it quicker. In addition, the gel can be put on your skin as a daily skincare. Maybe at night, put it on your skin and it will improve your skin health. And structural nanosilver gel, you can apply on your hands, around your eyes, around your ears, around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils if you're not feeling well during the cold season. If someone around you is not feeling well during the cold season, do the same thing prophylactically. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the structural nanosilver gel, and it will help to neutralize. Super important. And I have a new product on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, called Super Strong Relief. If you have a headache, you can use this, apply it to your temples, your forehead, and your neck and shoulder muscles to relieve that tension headache. Super Strong Relief will also help to relieve pain in your joints and muscle aches. So please go to my store, use this, you just apply it on the skin where it's hurting you, and within 30 seconds to 90 seconds, the pain will be gone or relieved. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, this video is CNN's perspective of, quote, good talks coming from Trump and Iran.
Moments ago, he has now decided to, quote, postpone any and all military strikes on Iranian power plants. after 2 days of talks with Iran. This, of course, comes after the president had issued an ultimatum. He was demanding Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz by tonight, or he warned that they would be risking strikes on their power plants. CNN's Kevin Liptak is at the White House this morning. So the president's message this morning is the window is now a little bit wider in terms of that deadline. What else in terms of these talks, Kevin?
Yeah, and that I think is what is most extraordinary about this post that we've gotten from the president. Until now, we did not understand that the U.S. and Iran were speaking at all over the course of this now a 3-week-long conflict. Now the president says that these conversations are underway. And so you can start to see and start to envision how potentially there is a diplomatic route to de-escalation that we did not know of until 10 minutes ago before the president was posting this. And I'll read you a little bit of what he said. He said he's pleased to report that the United States, the country of Iran, have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. The president goes on to say that based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I've instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. So you do see the president opening the window of this ultimatum that he had set on Iran, that he would strike power plants in that country if it did not reopen that very critical Strait of Hormuz, where all those energy tankers are waiting to go through. It's causing the price of oil to spike. Iran had threatened very severe retaliation, not only on energy strikes, but also on facilities in the Gulf. Now, some big questions remain, namely who the U.S. is talking to, because remember the president had said that the Iranian leaders that he thought he could work with had been killed. Now he says that those conversations are ongoing and, according to him, very fruitful. And so very significant development, I think, this morning. It does lead you to believe that the president has, or is at least searching for something of an off-ramp here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will see what more we learn about that potential off-ramp. Kevin, really appreciate it. Thank you. Sarah?
All right, joining us now, CNN senior military analyst and the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, Admiral James Stavridis. Thank you so much for being here. This just came in to us this morning. The president saying, look, we're having talks and they're going well. Is that a surprise to you? Because a lot of people don't realize that oftentimes, even in the midst of war, there are always sort of talks going on. But there was the issue of who is leading Iran. Apparently, they know who that is and they've been talking to them.
Well, first and foremost, let's all just say, wow, are we allowed to have some good news for at least 1 minute? And, it's going to be a roller coaster, but I think this is good news. And Sarah, you're exactly right. There's almost always kind of at least back channel conversations. I've been hearing about it from several sources. And here's what you want to watch as this roller coaster unfolds. I'll give you 3 things to watch. Number one, this
is interesting, because I remember talking about this maybe the previous video or 2 videos back about the need for a back channel that was very similar during the Cuban Missile Crisis. How JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis didn't trust his generals so much, and that they wanted a back channel to communicate to Khrushchev to de-escalate. This might be happening here.
Kushner and Steve Witkoff, because they are the ones who are going to be the U.S. side of this. Keep an eye on their normal counterparty, the Iranian foreign minister, still alive by all accounts. Abbas Aroghi is his name. So watch those 3. Where are they? Are they popping up, for example, in a place like Geneva? Number 2, watch the Marines. The Marines are still kind of chugging along toward the Gulf. The first big Marine force gets there in 7 days. Another one right behind it 2 to 3 weeks later. And then number 3, all eyes are going to continue to be on the Strait of Hormuz. Again, this is good news, but we just heard from our gas guy, and he laid out pretty clearly the strait's going to have to open before this is going to really turn into good news. But bottom line, Sarah, yeah, it's always better to be talk than bombs away.
Joining us now, CNN political and global affairs analyst Barak Ravid. This just came in this morning, and so I know it's a fast thing to have to try to figure out what happened here. But what do you know about this? This was a bit of a surprise, at least to many who thought the deadline was fast approaching.
Yes, I think it was a big surprise. At least last night I spoke to several U.S. officials and none of them thought, none of them thought that the ceasefire is coming or that there's any diplomatic opening. And I think that from what I learned in the last few minutes is that over the weekend, several countries from the region tried very hard to at least buy more time and sort of prolong Trump's 48-hour ultimatum to the Iranians to try and get some sort of diplomacy going. And those countries spoke to both Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and White House envoy Steve Witkoff to try and get more time. And I think that at least this initial effort, as we saw, was successful because it managed to get Trump to say, okay, I'm giving it another 5 days for diplomacy to see if we can get something going. By the way, those talks, as far as I understand, are not just about the Strait of Hormuz. They're about trying to launch a diplomatic process that ends the war. Obviously, the Strait of Hormuz is a very big part of it, but it is not just something that is focused on the Strait of Hormuz. It's much wider.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. If indeed they're talking about how to end this war and that those conversations are actually going on. You mentioned the foreign minister involved in this. So there is someone, because at some point, President Trump said that he didn't know who to talk to because so many of the leadership had been killed. It sounds to me like what you're learning is that the foreign minister is very much involved in this and maybe heading this up. So does it appear there is a diplomatic path out of this?
Well, it's a big question mark. You know, it just happened 30 minutes ago. And, you know, I think President Trump decided to give it more time. I think it was a good decision. But it still doesn't mean that an agreement is around the corner. And it also doesn't mean that the talks that are ongoing with Iran's foreign minister, who is, I think, his main quality at the moment is that he's the only one who answers the phone over there, because many other people are in hiding and are not communicating over the phone. So it doesn't mean that the leadership that is running the show right now, mainly the commanders of the IRGC, that they are ready for any kind of deal. The Iranian foreign minister, although he's a government official, senior government official, he does not call the shots. Or at least he's only one part of a much bigger decision-making process. So I think, you know, we should first try to find more details about what exactly happened. And second, keep our expectations low when it comes to the ability to get a deal. There's more time on the clock, which is super important because a U.S. strike on Iranian power plants would have triggered a massive Iranian retaliation against power plants all over the region, against desalination factories, against critical infrastructure, which would dramatically escalate this war. So the fact that President Trump gave it another 5 days is a hugely important step and hugely important decision, because it means that he understands that, you know, what kind of escalation such a strike would trigger, and that he's willing to try and find a diplomatic offer.
This just into us right now, Iran is now denying that they are in talks with Washington. This is just an hour after President Trump claimed the U.S. has had productive conversations with Tehran. According to Iranian state-affiliated media outlets, Iran accused Trump of trying to lower energy prices and buy time for military plans. Earlier this morning, Trump said he was putting military strikes on Iran's power plants on hold for at least 5 days pending the outcome of these talks. That is what he put on Truth Social. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. Thank you so much. Okay, so we just got this in that Iran is denying that they're having talks with the president's people. What do you make of all this? Because the president has backtracked on a deadline to what he called obliterate power plants in Iran if they didn't open the Strait of Hormuz.
Senator, good morning. Thanks for having me on. The president has backtracked on almost all of the original strategic rationale that he ripped out to the American public after the war started. I'm sure there are back-channel conversations happening between Iran and the administration right now, but the reason we are hearing Iran flex this way is because they have a new strategic asset. When this war began, Israel and the United States had air dominance over Iran. Now that this war is 3 weeks old, they still have air dominance, but Iran also now has its own strategic asset, which is sea denial. Iran has demonstrated to the world that it can selectively close the Strait of Hormuz to international oil transit, and that is spiraling global market.
All right, we're gonna go to a different video, but please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Myotrol. Myotrol is really important to take if you're male or female, 40 years of age or older. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol. This will help to reduce atrophy. This is super important to do to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the Myotrol. And Collagen is a new product that I have on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. This will help to remodel your joints, either due to a sports injury and you're having, soreness or problems with the joint, or you're just getting older and you're starting to develop arthritis. Collagen is going to help to remodel the joint. Take this every day. Now, how it works is that it's going to help to use type 2 collagen and ACAN to help with the joint. Also, it helps to recruit glucosamine to help to model up the cartilage, and chondroitin to help with the cushioning of the joint. And collagen will help to reduce the pain by blocking EP4. And collagen will help to reduce the erosion of the joint by blocking MMP3 and MMP13. So take this every day. You can stack this with the collagen powder that I have, or take it separately. Please go to my store and get the collagen and get the Myotrol. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount the number 5, and get $5 off any order. All righty. Crazy markets today. Let's listen into Fox.
Stopping Trump takes a fighter who gets results. Michael Lasher led the charge to protect our democracy, keep Trump's ICE agents out of schools and hospitals. Lasher helped pass New York's strongest gun safety laws and ironclad abortion protections. Michael Lasher for Congress.
Now think about it. Let me just
Hey, now let's go overseas where there's late-breaking developments, really by the hour.
That Michael Lasher that's running for Congress, I guess it's for New York, but he's for gun control, so he's against the Second Amendment. And you have to remember, the Second Amendment is the backstop for the First Amendment. You have no First Amendment if you don't have the Second Amendment, right? That's very clear. And if you don't believe me, read the Federalist Papers by Hamilton and Madison. All right. Secondly, that representative that's running he wants to protect abortion rights. No, what you're basically doing is killing a fetus. All right? We already killed 65 million fetuses since 1972. Don't you think that's enough? And then he's for keeping ICE agents out of the schools and out of the community. What, to protect the illegal aliens? So you have a representative that's protecting illegal aliens, eroding your Second Amendment and your First Amendment, and wants to kill more fetuses. What a Democrat. That's a Democrat for you.
sometimes by the minute in the Middle East. A short time ago, President Trump posting this on Truth Social. I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. Lucas Tomlinson, live in Dubai with the latest from there now. Lucas, hello.
Good morning, Bill. And over the weekend, President Trump had given Iran a 48-hour deadline that was set to expire at 7:44 p.m. Eastern time early tomorrow morning here in the region. But after that True Social post that you just read, Bill, President Trump now extending that deadline 5 days, perhaps after the markets closed, after he said he had good and positive discussions with the Iranians. Now, the Iranians denied that any kind of discussions took place. But here in the UAE, it joined more than 20 nations that have signed on to help open the Strait of Hormuz and condemned Iran's action. They said they would be willing to contribute, but did not list any specifics. But they want to get the Strait of Hormuz open. And over the weekend, U.S. forces did not get the weekend off, Bill. And now there's over 8,000 strikes hitting targets deeper now inside Iran, including destroying more of Iran's one-way attack drones. Though Iran's still averaging over 60 drones and over 2 dozen ballistic missile launches each day throughout countries in the region, more than 3 weeks into this war. And just a short time ago, as American and Israeli airstrikes continue, the air tasking order or starting lineup in layman's terms, Bill, will be without the USS Gerald R. Ford. She just arrived in Crete earlier today in the Eastern Mediterranean. After a fire on board in the laundry room, she will be replaced by the USS George H.W. Bush, getting ready to set sail in the coming days from Norfolk. And USS Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group should be arriving here in the Middle East in the coming days with over 2,000 Marines on board, and an equal number in the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard USS Boxer should be here in about a month after leaving San Diego in the past week. Now, there's also indications based on plane spotters that elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, probably the Alert Brigade, have arrived here in the region based on flights, cargo flights from Fort Bragg and likely also Fort Campbell. That's also home to elements of the 18th Airborne Corps, of course, 101st Airborne Division. Bill.
Lucas, thanks. Nice to see you again. Dubai, Lucas Tomlinson. Dana.
For more on this, let's bring in Fox News contributor Dan Hoffman, of course, a former CIA chief of station. President Trump saying that he's instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes for 5 days, and then followed up by saying that we're having, I think it was good talks. Iran immediately said, we're not having any talks. The president is not telling the truth. Obviously, I have plenty of reason to be skeptical of the Iranians and anything that they say. How do you measure it right now?
Well, the United States and Israel have decapitated Iran's leadership, destroyed much of Iran's ballistic missile capability, their drones, and targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. However, Iran has demonstrated the ability to continue to launch drone and missile strikes, including at the Diego Garcia base, at a distance farther than many thought Iran was capable of launching. And Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. And I think for every moment the Strait of Hormuz is closed, that's Iran's regime demonstrating their resilience. What they're telling us by doing that is that we can bomb them into oblivion, decapitate their leadership, and force them to go deeper into their security apparatus to find new leaders, but they're still standing. And they will want to dictate when this war ends, how it ends. And at the heart of it, Iran doesn't want to negotiate with the United States, at least there's no evidence that they want to, about their ballistic missiles nuclear program and support to proxy terrorists. And that is the reason why the United States got into this war at the very beginning. So look, this is going to be a critical week for us, clearly. We'll stand by for evidence that any discussions are happening, but how the war ends will be as important as how it began and why it began.
All right, well, let me show you. You mentioned the United States being able to eliminate many of the notable Iranian leaders. Let's put them on the board. So here's all of them. And yet they are still able to make decisions. And one of those decisions was to launch these missiles. I can pull up this map here. You mentioned Diego Garcia. So that's way down in, I believe, would you call that the Indian Ocean? Am I correct? And so I actually got to go there one time on a refueling stop. There's nothing there, but it's a key strategic location. And if you pull up the next map, everybody, Dan, this is what you were telling everyone. Iran is much more capable, apparently, and we don't know how many they have, of being able to reach other places. So in some sense, Iran could widen this war quite a bit.
They could, and there's still more that they could do, and our intelligence community has to be on high alert for Iranian cyber attacks against our critical infrastructure. We also have to be on high alert for Iranian terrorist operations all over the world, including here in the homeland. And remember that the leader of al-Qaeda, Saif al-Adil, has been enjoying sanctuary in Iran. So we have to be on high alert for that as well.
Let me ask you one other thing. Mark Rutte, who is, of course, NATO's Secretary General, talked to Shannon Bream yesterday, saying that he thinks that the allies will join together and help us. Watch.
European allies and partners all over the world have used the last couple of weeks to make sure that we come together, that they started planning to see what we can do collectively as allies, as partners of the United States, at the moment as possible, for the Strait of Hormuz to open up. And therefore, answering the president's call on this, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, Iran, I'm absolutely convinced that we will get this done together. Actually, it is already being planned.
A good message, but he said it's already being planned and we're going to start to plan this week. But you just said this week is very critical. I mean, time is of the essence?
Yeah, a little bit. Not like fine wine getting better with age. We've got to move on this quickly. Iran wants to fight their war of attrition against us and drive up the price of this war for the United States and the rest of the world, and our allies in particular, with high price of oil. They're certainly cognizant of the debate going on in our own country and general war fatigue. The longer this war goes on, I think the more challenging it's going to be for the Trump administration to keep up the effort. So we need to move quickly with serious alacrity.
Dan Hoffman, thank you. I'm sure we'll see you again this week. We appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on.
If there are nuclear sites last summer with your strikes, then how can you argue it was an imminent threat now?
Oh, we hit them so hard, we obliterated them. But that doesn't mean with the right equipment, you can't dig down and go get it. We don't want that, and we won't have that. But we obliterated that site. They still haven't been able to get it. That was a complete success. But if it wasn't, they would have had, if we didn't hit them, if we didn't use the B-2 bombers, which are unbelievable. We just ordered 22 more of them, modern version, by the way, super modern version. If we didn't hit them with the B-2 bombers, they would have had, within 2 weeks of that attack, that's why we hit them, because we knew they would have had a nuclear weapon. They would have used it on Israel and the entire Middle East.
Overall crime in Memphis is down 43% since you began this task force. Is this a template you think is?
Well, what I'm doing today, really, this was a little bit before, set up a couple of weeks ago. This was before we had this situation with Iran take place last night. And by the way, they're just not committed. When they say, I'm sure they don't.
Live Now is just repeating what.
Oh, I didn't know you were talking.
Live Now is just repeating the earlier this morning press discussion with Trump. So I'm going to go to a clip about Trump's market-driven reversal. This is from Bloomberg.
I studied the 10 most powerful empires over the last 500 years and the last 3 reserve currencies. It took me through the
risk is really difficult to manage right now. As you just see this morning, one tweet can turn it all around. But I think what it's really getting at is just the fragility that we do see in the markets. And we're dealing with really 3 main issues. One is obviously geopolitics, and we're getting close to a point where the longer this goes on, the more things have to shut down. Just the different commodities that get produced out of the Middle East. You can take months to restart some of these things. But then layer on top of that some of the existing fragility that's already been in place, which is that equity portfolios were already highly concentrated to start with. And then AI is increasing winners and losers. And those moats that had been in place for so long, we're starting to question how durable they are.
Aside from the geopolitics, if we put that aside just for a moment, how do you think about the U.S. equity markets versus the rest of the world here? We did have some outperformance in 2025 outside the U.S. Is that still in play here?
I think it should be. The U.S. is getting a bid right now. It could be because of what's going on with oil, but it also could be because that's where, as investors are taking in risk, that's where passive investing is. But I think there's a great opportunity to continue to diversify. With the U.S., you have this issue of concentration. 50% of the U.S. market is in technology. You go outside of the U.S., you get to exposures with different themes in financials, industrials, consumer.
But all of this, what's it, to borrow from the wonderful Arthur Levitt, so influential to me, from Arthur Levitt, what's it mean for Microsoft? I mean, March 31 is going to end. They're doing AI. They're still going to make revenue. They're going to still make 30, 40, 60% margins. What's the feature of life goes on here for the growth winners?
What you have to really think about with these growth winners is how are things changing for them? So we talked about this before in previous sessions, how much cash flow is plateauing now for these big growth winners because the amount of capex that they need to invest to keep the hyperscalers going and investing in data centers. That changes the dynamic of what they've had in the past. On top of that, these moats that some of these growth winners had is now in question. Can AI disrupt their ability to grow revenue without reinvesting in the business?
So that was a big trade just over the last several months. Kind of some of these software names, in particular, software as a service names that really in focus. But it just feels like, as Tom mentioned, Microsoft, Salesforce, they're so entrenched in the overall economy. It doesn't seem like they could be at risk, yet the market's not too discerning at this point.
I think what we need to think about really are three ways of managing risk today. First of all, if you think about AI disruption and you think about inflation, what that does is it really focuses you on shortening your duration of cash flows. And you want to get to things that have more visibility around those cash flows.
Al Jazeera is interviewing a reporter from one of the press from Israel. So I want to listen into here.
The war in Lebanon rather than Iran, because the Lebanese war doesn't bother him too much. It doesn't affect American interest, not in a dramatic way, for sure on oil prices. But another war will mean another lack of stability in the area. So I really hope that it will be one package. It depends much how devoted will be the Iranian to include Lebanon in a deal, and obviously how devoted will be Donald Trump.
When Donald Trump was talking about the apparent negotiations between the United States and Iran, he said that whatever deal there was, Israel would be on board with it. How do you read that?
Does Israel have any other choice but to be on board? I mean, the choices of Israel right now are fairly limited. Israel was never so depending on an American president, even not on the American administration. On the American president, Israel was never maybe so condemned in the world and lonely. And therefore, Israel has to be happy because Israel does not have an alternative to the American support right now. And Israel will try to persuade and try to put some pressure. But by the end of the day, Israel will have to follow anything that Donald Trump will tell Israel to do. Israel does not have much choices.
So explain for us, if you would, why such a move, Trump seeking a deal with Iran and hoping for some kind of resolution, why such a move does not mesh with Benjamin Netanyahu's objectives.
Okay, we're going to go to Bloomberg's Balance of Power. Please go to my store at the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the cleanse. This is 30 parts per million. Max 35 is 35 parts per million, or Max 14 parts per million. They're at different price points. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. Swish it in your mouth. Gargle about 20 seconds and swallow. This will help to boost up your immune system, improve your oral cavity, help the health of your epithelial cells, maintain your mucosal barrier. This is really important, and it neutralizes. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season, It's really important to take this every day, teaspoon a day for your normal dose, a tablespoon or two a day if you aren't feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well. Take this every day. I've been doing this for 6 years. So take it every day, boost up that immune system. And when you're neutralizing and you're boosting up your immune system, you're slowing down the aging process. That's really important.
Wall Street as well, pulling back significantly from the highs that we saw a little bit earlier. The S&P 500 is up 76 points, a little more than 1% right now after some questions were introduced here about the veracity of talks. The S&P 500 pairing its advance was up more than 2%. We're now up just 1.1%. The NASDAQ pairing its gain to 1.3%. It was up about 2.5%. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us, and I'll apologize in advance do we want to go to the president now? I guess this is going to be one of those shows, guys. Stand by, Rick and Jeannie. Let's hear from President Trump right now in Memphis. This is live on Bloomberg.
There's nothing worse, making a speech when nobody can hear you. This is beautiful and it's a great place. And Memphis has to like me because I have a lot of friends here and they were not happy a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, and now they said, we can't believe what's happened in terms of crime. In terms of you have said.
The audio is not working for him.
Jane, it's Sarah, the Duchess of York. I know you must be afraid. However did it come to this?
They said, we can't believe what's happened in terms of crime, in terms of what's gone on and the job that these people and some of the great people, many of the great people in the audience have done. And that's why I'm here today. In fact, we were going to cancel because we have a couple of events going on, as you probably noticed. So they said, oh, we'll cancel Memphis. I said, we're not canceling Memphis for anything. We're not canceling. We're not going to cancel Memphis, but we do have some big things happening, and very positive, I have to say. So before getting to our important discussion this morning, let me provide a brief update on Operation Epic Fury, which is a very good name, as it turns out. That was a name. They showed me 20 names, sir. What name would you like? I didn't like any of them. And then I get toward the end, I said, you got to be kidding. What? Operation Epic Fury. I love that name. And it's very appropriate for what's taken place, if you know, in Iran, because we knocked out their Navy, we knocked out their Air Force, we knocked out their anti-aircraft, we knocked out everything. And we did it with fury, actually. As I announced earlier, based on preliminary conversations between the United States and Iran over the past 2 days, I've directed the Department of War to temporarily postpone planned strikes against major energy and electricity targets in Iran. They have very, very big, new, actually, and very expensive, billions of dollars it costs to build them one missile, one of our powerful ones, and it comes down to the ground like it was made out of dust. But to determine whether a broader agreement can be reached, we've had very good discussions, very, very good discussions. And you have to understand, I know my whole life has been a negotiation, but with Iran, we've been negotiating for a long time. And this time, they mean business. And it's only because of the great job that our military did is the reason they mean business. They want to settle, and we're going to get it done, I hope. So, hopefully this will be possible, but no matter what, we'll ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon. They would have had one if we allowed the Obama deal to stand. That was the Iran nuclear deal, they called it. They would have had one. Marshall III. I tell you what, Arthur, we would have nuclear weapons up there when, would you say, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we would have been in a position that nobody wants to be in. We won't allow ourselves to be in that position. Over the past 3 weeks, the United States military and our partners have been decimating Iran's military capabilities with overwhelming firepower, skill, lethality, and force, and we're destroying their ballistic missiles and drones programs with launchers down by more than 90%. We're hitting their launches at a level that nobody even thought of before. 90%. They can't launch them, and they don't have very many of them, because most of them have been annihilated. But we've annihilated their defense industrial base, eliminating their navy. We had 158 ships are down. I said to my people, why didn't you capture this ship? I said, were they good or not? They said, they were great, sir. So why didn't you capture? We could have used them. They said, it's more fun to put them at the bottom of the sea. But they're not there anymore. So we eliminated their navy, Pete, right? And that's gone. We eliminated their air force. We eliminated all of their air defense, everything. We eliminated everything there is to eliminate, and we eliminated them. We eliminated their leaders. We had the first set of leaders. They're gone. Then they met, 88 people met. And it's sad. I mean, it's sad they couldn't have made a deal. We could have made a deal with them a long time ago. Then the second set, 88 people met to pick a new leader. And they're now extinguished. And then they're meeting again, but now nobody wants to be the leader. It's one of the few political jobs that nobody wants anywhere in the world. Nobody wants it. It's a very dangerous job. My job is dangerous too, but their job is worse. In other words, we're systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America. They're not threatening us anymore. As Commander-in-Chief, it's my sacred responsibility to protect our country from all threats. For decades, Iran refused every opportunity to renounce its nuclear ambitions, and in recent months, its own negotiators bragged to our representatives about having enough material to make nuclear weapons. And that was supposed to deter me, but it didn't deter. It made me more anxious, and it just made it much more important. This mission that we're all on together is much more important, and we did it quicker. Iran's missile capabilities were also growing so fast that it would soon have become virtually impossible to stop them. Once they have a missile, once they have what they were building was incredible. And you got a little glimpse of it by the fact that when they came out, they started shooting all of their neighbors. Their neighbors weren't fighting with them. They were getting along okay with their neighbors. And I was surprised. Everybody was surprised. And it actually worked in reverse because their neighbors then turned against them. Now Iran has one more opportunity to end its threats to America and her allies, and we hope they take it. Either way, America and the entire world will soon be much safer and will be a much more secure planet. In addition to all of this, we're working on so many different things. You know, our economy was fantastic. We had a Dow at 50,000. They say it couldn't happen in 4 years. It wouldn't happen during my term. But if I got anywhere close, it would be a great success. Well, in my first year, we hit 50,000. And with the S&P, they said, even more difficult. They said it would be impossible to hit 7,000 on the S&P. And we hit that in our first term. And then, unfortunately, I called Pete, I called General Kane, I called a lot of our great people. We have great people. And I said, let's talk. We got a problem in the Middle East. We have a country known as Iran that for 47 years has been just a purveyor of terror. And they're very close to having a nuclear weapon. We can keep going and get that 50,000 up to 55 and 60 is no end. Or we can take a stop and make a little journey into the Middle East and eliminate a big problem. And Pete, I think you were the first one to speak up. And you said, let's do it, because you can't let them have a nuclear weapon. So we are now having really good discussions. They started last night, a little bit the night before that. And I think they're very good. They want peace. They've agreed they will not have a nuclear weapon, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see. You have to get it done. But I would say there's a very good chance. And it began when I said that we were planning tomorrow on shooting down some of their power plants, and we're going to hold that up. Hopefully we won't have to do it. And hopefully we can make a deal that's good for all of us, including the Middle Eastern allies that have been very good to us, including Israel, that's been a great partner in this fight. They've really been a good partner in the fight. They fought hard. But we'll see what happens. I think there's a very good chance we're going to end up in a deal. And so we're giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us. And I would say at the end of this period, I think it could very well end up being a very good deal for everybody, as good as if we went all the way and just literally annihilated the place, which if we don't have to do that, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing. In addition, after the appalling lines and massive disruptions at major airports nationwide last weekend, I'm again demanding the Democrats in Congress immediately end their disgraceful shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security and restore the full funding for airport security and the TSA. They are holding it up because they want to take care of illegal immigrants coming into our country. They want to take care of criminals that are in sanctuary cities. They want to take care of transgender for everybody, literally the mutilization of our children, men in women's sports. But what they don't want to do is give us anything to do with citizenship for voting or voter ID. Can you imagine? We're the only country that doesn't do voter ID. Every country does voter ID. You know, brought to my attention today that we're the only country that does mail-in voting. Mail-in voting means mail-in cheating. I call it mail-in cheating. And we got to do something about it all. And it's part of Homeland Security. And I'm suggesting strongly to the Republican Party, don't make any deal on anything. The most important thing we can have is what's called the Save America Act. Don't make any deal on anything unless you include voter ID, and you have to be a citizen to vote. You have to show citizenship to vote. Very easy to do. It's very insulting when they say people can't do it because they don't know how to do it. Anybody that can't do it, I think it's a very insulting thing to say. The Democrats are fully to blame with the struggle the great American public is going through at the airports. They're going through a big struggle right now, and we just put ICE in charge, and they're helping TSA, the agents, and they're working together so far very well. I actually suggested that in the airports they take off their masks, and they did that. In the airports, that is, I'm a big believer in the mask because we have, you know, Biden allowed hundreds of thousands of killers into our country. We're rapidly getting them out, by the way. But they would go after these people if they knew exactly who they were. But in the airports, it's different. I didn't love the look in the airport as you get off the plane. So I made a request and they agreed to it. So they're not going to be doing that. We will also bring out, if we don't have enough, we will bring out the National Guard and, you know, where we need it to help out at the airports. But we're not going to let this happen. It's extortion by the Democrats. They're holding up money that's already been approved. And now they're willing to go $5 billion reduction in ICE in order to get the approval on a deal that they approved, the great big beautiful deal, which is the biggest tax cut in history, the biggest regulation cut in history. They want to basically renegotiate a deal that they already approved.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase, and bring down inflammation. When you take this daily, what this is going to do is help to improve your immune system, your endocrine system, your cardiovascular system. You're going to be able to recover after a workout quicker, reduce inflammation at the joint level, and also help bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals at your brain level. So please, go to my store, get the heirloom barley, take this every day. This is going to help to slow down the aging process. And Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen here. Take it every day. This will help with musculature, cardiovascular health, improve your energy levels, rev up your metabolism, help with brain function, slow down the aging process, help with the immune system and your endocrine system. This is really powerful stuff. Take it every day. You can stack it with the heirloom barley together for max benefit. especially to help to control the A1C levels. But you should also apply a holistic approach, and that is proper diet and exercise, drink filtered water, do some cardio training and resistance training, stretching and balancing exercises, learning new things, trying to have some mindfulness or spirituality, proper sleep. All these work together to help to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, get the Born Boost, and get the heirloom barley. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
I didn't mean what they've done to me and everybody else. It's a disgrace. They're the weaponizers, and what they've done to people, we never let that happen again. We can never let them get away with it again. They are the greatest weaponizers. Fortunately, it didn't work because here I am with you. So it didn't work out too well. It didn't work out too well. But they want to have people come into our country. So many of these people are murderers. They're drug dealers. They're the worst criminals anywhere in the world. They want them in our country. They don't want them to come out. They make it almost impossible, but we get them out anyway. They should have never been allowed to enter our sacred ground. These people should have never, they came from all over the world. They came from all over. They came from the Congo in Africa. They came from all over South America, Asia, everywhere. And they were from jails and mental institutions. They were drug dealers. They were murderers. 11,888 murderers. In any event, the Democrats are being blamed by the American people for the catastrophe going on right now at our airports and at other points of transportation and beyond. And we want the public to know we're not going to let them out of this trap that they created for themselves. And I'm suggesting very strongly
Donald Trump speaking in Memphis, saying that he will be postponing strikes against energy infrastructure in Iran for 5 days. Remember, his 48-hour deadline was due to expire overnight. He said they've had very good discussions between the United States and Iran, which is something that Iran very much disputes.
They're going to go to commercial.
Got the late night munchies, but this is all we have.
With Democrats and let them out of this hole that they've buried themselves in. You have to take the votes in the Senate to approve. You need votes to approve. We have to get Democrat votes. And at a certain point, if you could get rid of the filibuster, it would be great. It would be great. Get rid of the filibuster and get it all done. So we'll get it done. We want another thing. We can, or we don't have to, add those other items. And by the way, they say they're 80-20 items. They're not 80-20, they're 99-1. Men playing in women's sports is a 99-1. You look at transgender mutilization of our children, that's a 99-1. And we have that in the bill too. So they won't sign it, they let the people reject them. And what we have to do is we have to win the midterms. This is the most important election. Because all of the gains that we've made, we built the greatest economy, the greatest military. I built the military in my first term, and we built the greatest military in the world. We're showing it now with Venezuela, with Iran. Everybody knows we have the greatest, most powerful military in the world. And we're in a position that we haven't seen. We're respected. You know, our country now is respected all over the world. A year and a half ago, we were a laughing stock. We were a laughing stock. The king of Saudi Arabia told me.
Let's listen to Bloomberg here.
500 was up almost 2.5%, up 1.3 now. And those oil prices, to your point, are still lower, but we've seen lower prices certainly today. WTI West Texas Intermediate at $89. What were we, around 85 around the bottom this morning? So we're just trying to gauge what's happening. The president's speaking now live in Memphis. Haley, he essentially reiterated what he said this morning when it came to talks with Iran.
Yeah, and of course, in addition to talking with Iran, he also suggested that the Strait of Hormuz, that crucial transitway for energy flows, will reopen soon, and that he and perhaps the new Ayatollah will be in charge of it in a kind of joint venture, though he did say that the Ayatollah is not who the U.S. is speaking with, suggesting that there still needs to be one picked.
Yet Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are back at it. Apparently they were in talks just last evening, Kaylee. So We'll do our best to pick up the pieces this hour. We'll start with an update from Jeff Mason, our White House correspondent, with the very latest from the administration.
First, though, let's get the latest on the markets as they've been whipsawed by these headlines, as Joe and I were mentioning. So let's get more detail now with Amy Morris here in Washington. Hey, Amy.
Hey, Kaylee, yes, you're right. Oil did fall sharply. Stocks rose after President Trump postponed strikes on Iranian power plants and said his team was holding discussions about ending the conflict. That has flip-flopped now. S&P and NASDAQ paring back those gains. Both had been up more than 2%. Now they're up about 1%. As Iran says it's firing more missiles and drones at Israel and U.S. targets. Israel says it struck a central headquarters of Iran's IRGC, and there are questions about talks between the U.S. and Iran. WTI now down about 9%, around $89 a barrel. Brent crude dropping more than 9%, near $101 per barrel. And President Trump said the Strait of Hormuz would be open, quote, very soon if this works, and may be jointly controlled by Iran and the U.S., and that prices will, quote, drop like a rock once that deal is achieved. We do check markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. Let's get some specific numbers for you. S&P 500 down 1.2%, or rather higher, 1.2%. NASDAQ is 1.25% higher, and the Dow is about 1.5% higher. 10-year Treasury yield at 4.35%. The 2-year yield at 3.85%. Bitcoin now about 3.5% higher, around $70,000. Let's look at the Fed now. Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee says he could envision the U.S. Central Bank needing to raise interest rates or returning to rate cuts. It just depends on how the war with Iran plays out. Fed Governor Stephen Myron says the central bank shouldn't be setting any policy based on short-term considerations related to the war in Iran. For on-demand,
the Federal Reserve is not going to raise rates in the middle of a oil crisis. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. C60 is a very potent antioxidant. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT coconut oil. Take a teaspoon a day every day, preferably on an empty stomach. And what this will do is soak up free radicals in your interstitium, in your inside your cells, outside of the cells, in your vascular system, within your brain. Also, what this will do is help to boost up your immune system and your endocrine system. And by soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation because it's reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. And oxidized LDL is really important to build up plaque. Well, if you reduce the concentration of oxidized LDL, you don't have as much plaque to form. Now, C60, when you're soaking up the free radicals within the cell, you're improving the health of the mitochondria, so your energy levels will improve. Now, at the brain level, your neurons will have less stress. It'll soak up those free radicals. The mitochondria will improve. You'll have more neurotransmitters. You'll have more energy for those neurotransmitters to be produced. So take C60 every day to slow down the aging process. C60 also helps the basal layer for your skin so you'll look younger. This stacks really well with Boomer Boost, resveratrol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you take a teaspoon of C60 every day. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper to buy the higher ounce configuration. Cheaper per ounce, what I mean. And C60, when you stack it with some of the supplements I've been mentioning, you're going to have added benefits of slowing down the aging process, especially with the resveratrol, the lignans, the turmeric, the ashwagandha, Max 35, Boomer Boost, Clarity Factor. These are all really powerful stacks to help us slow down the aging process. But again, it's taking the proper supplementation, but also approaching it holistically, eating properly, drinking filtered water, detoxifying your body regularly, getting proper sleep, learning new things, making sure that you do resistance training and cardiovascular training. Stretching and balancing exercises are really important. Mindfulness or spirituality will help to calm the central nervous system. You want to go into parasympathetic mode instead of sympathetic mode. If you're in sympathetic mode all the time, you produce more cortisol, and that's immunosuppressive, and it causes more stress in the body. You want to go into parasympathetic and be calm. Your heart rate will be lower. You will have less cortisol produced. So if you apply this in a holistic way with the proper supplementation, you're going to radically slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You'll save $5 on any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Thank you for listening. Please share the links. Please subscribe to all my channels. All the information is in the description of this video. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.